Yo.
Yo,
What's up, buddy?
not too
How's
much.
my
What's up with
how's
you?
my audio? How's my
You're good.
audio? Good? Okay.
Yeah.
Dope.
How you
What's
doing?
up, man?
Feel like it's been a while.
Yeah, dude.
It's
Since the
good
last time
shit.
we talked, I joined
Yeah.
Genderqueers for Hamas. So I got that going for me. And we're doing a
Popular
lot.
these days.
Yeah. You know, if you read the Quran, they're actually pro-gay, according to TikTok. So
I'm actually
TikTok
reading it
is
right now. For
TikTok
real.
tends to be the imam that I really follow the closest. So I think that they have the best hold on what Islam really wants. So
dude, as somebody who is not on TikTok like at all, I see the things that come out of there and I just go, Jesus Christ, this is just CCP fueled propaganda to the max, like set to the highest settings. I mean, yeah, like Instagram Western propaganda, sure, Twitter Western propaganda, but man, the shit that the communists are pushing on TikTok is actually insane. I don't know if you paid attention
Hold on,
to.
Hodl. I'm just gonna fire this up, okay? Because
Yeah,
we're just
go
gonna
ahead.
go, right? All right.
Our behind the scenes conversations are just like
Exactly. It's the
the
same
actual
anyways.
conversations. But no,
All
I
right,
was
there we
saying
go.
that literally everything that comes out of TikTok, I view as just straight up CCP propaganda, and it is. And I don't know if you paid attention recently, but like the two trends that just make you go, "What the fuck?" are there's a bunch of leftists now saying that the Quran supports being a genderqueer. It's like, no, it doesn't, dog. No, it doesn't. I don't even need to read the Quran to know it definitely don't. Okay. And then the other one is there were a bunch of young liberal white women on TikTok reading Osama bin Laden's A Letter to America and being like, damn, this motherfucker's got points, yo. Imperialism and shit, dog. It's like, no, what is wrong with all
Hold
of
on.
you?
I got two things to say about that. First of all, I've never really been on TikTok. And if I look all weird right now, it's because sun is blasting through the windows in my face. But I've never been on. I've heard all the, I've seen clips basically from it, all the libs of TikTok and all the crazy shit that comes off of it. But one, like for sure, let's just assume, because you have to in this day and age, that China has its tentacles in it somehow, right? Because they can do whatever they want over there, basically. But I do think it's a bit of a cop out on our side of the pond to be like, oh, like in China they serve them everyone engineering videos, and here it's all about like whatever the crazy woke shit of the day is. And let's just assume there's some of that, right? But it's not all them, like, because that crazy shit is happening here on our side of shit way more. Like that kind of shit doesn't happen in China. They legitimately are more focused on productive shit, for lack of a better term. You know what I mean? So like, I'm sure there's some algorithmic skewing, but there's a lot of material to work with over here.
Well, oh, 100%. And I'm not doing a conservative talking point thing where I go, over there, they're training them to be scientists. And over here, we're telling children to chop their dicks off. Like, I'm not doing that thing. But I am saying that everything I see come out of TikTok seems like it was engineered by the CCP to weaken America. I mean, that's just like, I can't help but see it. And also, not just on TikTok, I see it everywhere I look, basically. Everyone is a pathetic coward these days, and it's hard to see it.
yeah.
My point is just that they don't have to work very hard to promote that, because there's enough of it being produced and promoted locally. You know what I mean?
100%. 100%.
Yeah,
then,
we've just partnered with being retarded with them. So like we're just giving them all like we're like programming their AI for them. We're like
if
helping
they're
them
involved
out.
at all, they're just like, why wouldn't we? All we gotta do is sprinkle a little algorithm on that shit, and it's gonna like blow up into an inferno. Why not? It's like, how could we resist almost?
There was a Twitter thread that was like, you guys, I just saw a military commercial with a bunch of white guys doing drills. We are going to war. It's like, the minute they need young white guys to go to the meat grinder over in the Middle East, they're like, the few, the proud, the brave. The rest of the time, it's like, everyone chop off your penis. We're doing whatever we're doing over here.
Dude, those ads do get me, though. I mean, they don't get me, but like I see the appeal, right? Because you're like, damn,
totally.
Like to be like all proud and like well dressed and suited and booted and like all that honor and courage. It's dope.
But I like want that for like good and legitimate causes, not
sure.
like blowing up brown people. Like
of
if there's like bad people we could fight, like say our politicians or like other people that suck and steal from us, like game on. But But also, like, you're kind of retarded if you join the military at this point. You're like, hey, like, now they'll like take me back after I refuse the COVID vaccination and like am saying that I'm like okay with being a white male. You know, like, come on, guys. Like, you guys are being a bit stupid here. But I guess that's
well,
kind of the theme right
no
now.
surprise there.
No, 100%, 100%.
I'm
Like,
just saying the marketing's on point.
well, there's actually a problem with military recruitment because of all of the legacy families, you know, the military families who, you know, generally that's actually a large portion of military recruitment is families who, especially in, you know, the officer, like, you know, in high command, basically, military families are sending their sons into the military because it's a tradition for some of these families, you know, 5 generations of military men, yada, yada, yada. And they're looking around at all this, you know, DEI communism basically and saying, what the fuck is this? I'm not sending my sons to this. You know what I mean? And yeah, it's actually been hurting their numbers significantly. And
Sure.
you know, they're out there like wondering if they, you know, because there was a report from the Pentagon, I believe, that said, you know, if we go to war with China, they would need 3,000 bodies every day for the meat grinder, essentially. And they were worrying about a draft and thinking about the possibility of a draft. And, you know, if they could get away with the draft, they would do one for sure. But it's going to be hard with just how soft and weak all the Gen Zs are, you know?
Yeah, totally.
I mean, a draft would be wonderful, though. It would be great.
Go on.
You think it'd be great because it would backfire so heavily? Is that why?
Oh yeah, like I'm out there burning draft cards. Like we're gonna be rabble rousing. You know, like that's really what I'm hungry for. Is like we're so obviously overshot on our corruption, treason, and generally using the federal government as like people's personal piggy bank that like I just want to see people set fire to it and just to display their general outrage. And I mean, like that's the most recent, you know, with Musk telling everybody to go fuck themselves with this blackmail shit. Like that's where we're at in the narrative. Like everyone was so outraged that like the political process doesn't work even remotely anymore. And so like people are just angry and want to fucking rage. So like, yeah, implement your draft. Like this will be amazing to watch Americans actually like rise up and remember that like we're rabble rousing people that are supposed to keep our government in check, not the other way around. So
I'm a very usually politically, you know, historically, I've been a very nuanced thinker, even though it doesn't appear that way if you read my Twitter. But like
so sophisticated.
In person, I'm always willing to have a conversation and try and find the middle ground, etc.
Right.
But after living through the COVID years, I've reached that point myself where it's just like, oh, you think what? Nah, fuck you. That's retarded. You know what I mean? People are like, you can't say retarded. It's like I can say whatever the fuck I want. You know, I used to say retarded a lot. And I still do. So fuck off. Like, you know what I mean? It's so annoying.
It's a great word. No, I agree with what you both just said, but I do once again have to say that like the whole point of Bitcoin is to channel that malcontent and that frustration into a actual solution and a peaceful solution, right? Because anytime, and I get the, you know, the ethos of rising up against your oppressors, right? But it typically leads to the very same thing once again, or a power vacuum or whatever. And I'm not saying don't push back. Like I love the Elon thing the other day, and everyone should be doing that on every level of their life. But I think the safer and ultimately more effective way to do it is to like opt out and opt into what we always talk about. And in that way, like it might not happen on the time scales we want, right? Maybe it's 100-year enterprise. We can free ourselves to a large degree on a short time frame, right? Because that's kind of what wealth does. But, you know, systemically, maybe it takes 100 years. But if it takes 100 years to stop the cycle of pitchfork revolutions and turn it into, you know, the Orange Revolution, where instead of all this anger and frustration that everyone viscerally feels, right? You want to let that flare out. But I do think the most effective and the most responsible and the most like sustainable solution is to channel that frustration not into the overt protests and this wars and draft burning and like anything that's going to draw attention and potentially harm to yourself, but just stop feeding the beast, basically. And however long it takes for the beast to starve, a decade, 50 years, 100 years, who knows? That's we just got to accept that aspect of our time in history, right? But I think we all have to exercise restraint on how clown world frustrates us and not letting that take our eye off the actual prize here.
Yeah, I don't think it's about violent revolution. And if that's how me and Eric were coming off, that's not what I'm saying. I don't think it's what Eric's saying either.
Well, that was mostly addressed to Eric because I saw some videos recently.
It's about Bitcoin gives us the ability to enforce boundaries, right? Like we can actually say, no, you can't steal my wealth without my permission or without some extreme coercive measure against me. So no, I'm not just gonna go along for the ride on whatever you want. I'm gonna, and also like I'm an American and my rights come from God. They don't come from you. They are inalienable to me. You cannot divorce me from my rights. I have a right to hold my wealth. I have a right to speak my mind. I have a right to be part of the political process. These are my fucking God-given rights. No government gave them to me. The founding fathers, all they did was enshrine these rights. They gave us the protections for the fucking people that they knew were going to come later, who are here now and have been here for a fucking while. The founding fathers anticipated, I'm not going to say names, but basically everybody who's in Congress today, they anticipated a bunch of grubby, weaselly cowards trying to steal everything that wasn't nailed down,
Which they're doing really well. They're highly skilled at it. I mean, on that note, like, I agree with you totally, John. The other one is like, look, if we get a combination of the two, I'm not gonna object, but we definitely need to like stop the oscillations of the cycles because each time it just like ramps up a bit more. Yeah, and that's what's so exciting about Bitcoin. But also, I'm just like frustrated at this point because I'm like, like I have the magical object that can like liberate you from like all of the circumstances and bullshit that like you're upset about. And they're like, yeah, but like I have to like learn about that. And that's hard. So I'm just going to go back to what I'm doing. And it's like, motherfucker, like, what do I have to do here to get you just to read a little bit to help yourself? Because like number go up is great, but it does all this other shit that's like way better. And that's what I'm trying to get my point over to. And I don't know. I think I just suck the most at orange pilling as like a general frustration that like I'm supposed to hold for like what
is Eric gone for you, Hodl?
Do we lose Eric? Yeah. I couldn't tell if it was my connection or not. I'll keep going. Listen, you motherfuckers, this is a Heideggerian principle, and nobody fucking understands it. Okay, he's back.
No, you were finishing out just right. That's where I was going. But no, like I like suck at orange pilling and I wish I was better at it, but like at the same time I don't know. I guess I'm just Eric, stuck in this Eric, tragedy.
Isn't this always kind of the restraint or the humility that like actual truth forces you to adopt? Because the truth is such that you want to grab people by the collar, whether it's a religious truth or an economic truth or whatever the hell kind of truth Bitcoin is. You want to shake them and say things could be so much different, things could be so much better if only you knew the truth, right? And that method is never effective. And so to be a genuine steward and promoter of the truth, you actually have to exercise that humility in reference to it, that restraint, and embody it to the extent you can. That's the only, and again, like back to the point, if it takes 20 years, if it takes 100 years, of course, we'd all love to see it stop tomorrow because of all the crazy shit, all the people that are being murdered and killed and stolen from. It's horrible, but we don't get to make that choice, right? And I feel like if we don't exercise that humility, we actually do it a disservice, and maybe we even delay it rather than advance it or have it occur, sooner.
Maybe, I don't know. Maybe I'm just too gung ho for it, but I think we need like a stronger
because I think you have to resist entirely like all of human history. The only option when things have gotten out of control, when like what's up, Rob? When
what's up, guys?
Yeah, we're live, Rob.
When there was like the untouchable class, right, where they could steal and they own the justice system, you can't do a damn thing about it. They know they're cheating and stealing and lying. They're cheating and stealing and lying. Doesn't matter, right? Anytime throughout all of human history that's happened, the only solution was pitchforks and violence. That's it. There was never any other solution. Now there's another one. And it really behooves us to focus on maximizing that as a solution and exercising restraint at reverting back to the old way of solving things. Because as we all admit, like we're in this spot right now because that doesn't actually solve things long term. Yes, like the American experiment was amazing. And it's like how many years did that really solve things? Like how many years were like the people in power in the States, for example, legit? Certainly not the case now by and large, right? So
it was like 200. It was 200
yeah,
years.
maybe it's up for debate, right?
Yeah.
But the point is like that just where it's such a unique circumstance we're in, where we have a long-term viable solution that doesn't require the bodies to be piled up, and we should do everything we can to maximize the benefit of that and avoid the same old way of going about change.
I think the problem is that, you know, we all think that's true as Bitcoiners, but if you look at what's going on in mainstream politics, there's so much bad blood on both sides and so much revenge seeking. And this is a very ancient pattern. And I don't think we as Bitcoiners are going to be able to enforce a ceasefire. I just don't think that's going to happen.
I don't think we'll be able to, but I think the existence of this thing.
Yeah. Even the incentives are not going to be able to stem the unraveling. The unraveling is going to happen no matter what.
I totally agree. I'm not saying there's not going to be chaos. I mean, I think that's a virtual certainty. I'm just saying that like each of us who, to use the framing of the truth, like quote unquote, see the truth. I think we like all we can do is act as best we can, as virtuously as we can, as humbly as we can in reference to that, such that we don't make matters worse, that we're actually maybe a small cohort. Again, maybe it's beyond our timeline, but that we kind of show the path to a different way of resolving things and a different place of ultimately getting to a different place than we have been in the past.
Yeah.
I love how as soon as I get on here, you guys are already like deep in the deep end.
It was like the first words out of my mouth to John were like ranting and raving about something. So he was like, let's just hit record, you know?
He's like, this is how it always goes. I mean, like, I kind of think we need a combination of the two, because like maybe some pitchforks and some Bitcoin, because I've just been thinking more and more like, you know, going around to all these conferences and educating people about Bitcoin's fun and all, but like I feel like it needs to get that political slant and be like, look, like this isn't just about number go up. This is about like number not go down forever. Like that's more important to me than number go up, is that like number go down on everything forever because of the actual framework that we have for economics. And it turns out that like in number go down forever, that like there's a class of people that are like pumping and using that apparatus for themselves.
What do you mean number go down forever?
Like fiat, and just like how the whole general economy is designed around
like shit gets worse forever.
Not just shit gets worse forever, but that like the fundamentals of how economics are designed with a fiat currency, with it being constantly inflationary, like fucks up the whole thing. So that like we get all of this fucked up economic development in areas that shouldn't be developing so rapidly, and we have development in other areas that isn't happening. Like the fact that food is as expensive as it is for most people, and that like we can freely grow it, like is fucking insane to me. But so I don't know. I feel like the political aspect of what Bitcoin represents in changing everything for everyone everywhere at the same time, to me, is like the more important thing. And I've just been thinking a lot more about like how do we compel and push that narrative much more forcefully than it currently is, because it's kind of in the background.
I don't think it works forcefully. I don't think anything really works forcefully, and that's kind of what the whole premise of what you're fighting against is. Like, I mean, I don't mean to exaggerate too much, but you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't think the compelling and the coercing and the forceful ramming of anything actually works. Like, people have to be inspired and aspire to something rather than, you know, being forced into it. And I get what you mean, like be more adamant with the messaging and stuff like that. And it also depends what we mean when we say pitchforks. Like I'm totally referring to violent, you know, conflict resolution. You may be saying like we need to get more political, we need to be on the stage and all that kind of stuff, which, you know, fair enough if that's your bent.
Yeah, that's more of where I'm leaning. I'm not putting out the other options, you know, because I think carrying around some of these bodies on pitchforks is a meaningful thing. Because also, like what I said on Blue Collar Bitcoin stands is that like fuck these people, they're committing treason, like they're stealing from us, like they're openly committing crimes against all of us, and like we don't have a meaningful way to stop them. And I think like connecting Bitcoin and connecting this other point together, I think we get like a very powerful thing. But Again, I'm not terribly interested in doing it myself. So where's our hero that's going to come up and do this for us? Because I want to go take a nap or something.
Right. Well, I
I
think,
was, yeah, I was gonna say that's the problem, is that in our current era, everything is so passive. We're all so passive,
yeah.
you know? Like I just feel like in a different era, we would have all been marching in the street or something, and now it seems pointless to do that, you know? And I have to wonder if that's us, or if that's circumstance, or if it's both, or, you know, I don't know. Maybe we just have malaise.
Well, the
Like a
marching
general
in the
malaise.
street thing, like, again, I don't think it does much in this day and age. I think we all are doing, we could all be doing better. We're not our highest version of ourselves, perhaps, but like, I think we're all engaging in the thing that we think is going to most free us, is going to most enable us to say no on every level of oppression that might be coming at us. And there's a recognition that the more people that do that, the more we starve the aforementioned beast, right? So I think, like, I don't know if another era I'd be on the street protesting, but to Eric's point about, in eras where you could only fight, like, I'd be much more, the romantic notion of fighting like hand to hand with swords, like a la Sparta or something, is much more romantic to me than like being in violent conflict these days, where you can just be drone bombed like without even a second's notice that you're in the crosshairs. That doesn't invoke like romantic notions of like dying for what you believe in or for your family or whatever. It's like and maybe that's part of the passivity that you're referring to these days. Like, armed conflict is, such a departure from what it used to be, that I don't know, it's weird. It's changing how we have to think about it.
I just wanted to hit on John, you and Eric hit that word compelling, and sounded like you had kind of a divergence on it. But it's interesting that you can tell a compelling story,
right,
which is different than compelling someone to do something. Right? It's like the difference between being influential or persuasive and actually compulsive on someone. So I think that was just kind of like the disagreement I picked up between you two. It's like Eric saying we need a compelling narrative for Bitcoin. Maybe, like, I heard someone say that Bitcoin needs its Hollywood moment. Like, there needs to be this slip into mainstream consciousness of how important this thing is, how existentially important this thing is, rather than it just being, fringe magic internet money or whatever it's widely considered to be today. The other thing that came up for me, and I've said this a bunch of times, but as soon as I tuned in, you guys are reminding me of my favorite lyrics again, which is, there is no political solution to our troubled evolution. Have no faith in Constitution. There is no bloody revolution. It's like every revolution we've had across history has just been a supplanting of the top of the political hierarchy by another group. All right. And every time you knock off the top, you just create a power vacuum that's filled by someone else or some other governmental body. And that bloody cycle is just endless, essentially, until you have something like Bitcoin that can just disempower the entire idea of a political hierarchy.
I mean, this is like the word revolution, means a cycle, and so like we need to actually like break that cycle. And I think we're on the precipice of it. It's just, I don't know, like what comes after, how does stuff actually change in a meaningful way? Like, how do we move away from the current political structure of, these false democracy parliamentarian things that are really kind of part of a globalized network that seems to be working in lockstep tandem with each other. And particularly in like, the crisis is getting much more extreme with the amount of surveillance they have and with them wanting to implement CBDCs. And so I just keep thinking for myself, like, how and where does this thing politicize itself in a meaningful way that before, this shit gets deployed? Because like, people very quickly are going to figure out like, oh shit, like the $300 I got in CBDCs like has all these crazy strings attached to it. And like, now I can't even get my money out in a meaningful way. So like, what do I even do? It's a bit stark to kind of stare down the barrel of that and realize like we don't really have much for an assemblage of like a response.
Yeah, and then I think one thing that worries me, and I'd love to get all of your takes about this, is I'm going to skip ahead. Just bear with me on the hypothetical here. Let's skip ahead to a future where Bitcoin is totally won. Okay. and we've gotten through the, you know, shadow prohibition era that I think we're like barreling towards right now. What's to prevent Bitcoiners from just becoming the state? Because every wealthy group in history has lobbied the state to more closely align with their values, and then they've gotten control of the state and used the state as a weapon or a shield against the poor. And if Bitcoiners are the new wealthy elite, you know, it's like casting the ring into the fire. Like, what is going to cause us to actually cast the ring of power into the fire rather than keep it for ourselves and keep the cycle going forever? I think about this a lot, and I don't come up to any, you know, I don't know. I really don't know what the moment is, or what the ethos is, or what would compel us to be better versions of ourselves.
I mean, one of the things that I see, though, is that like what's kind of different from our political class, if you will, from others, is that like we have this whole plebeian attachment of like people, like all of these anons that are out on the internet that like are sort of the substrate that make it up. And so like I've thought a lot about essentially how like crypto anarchists and like anons like sort of are this base level that hopefully kind of keeps people honest. But like, again, there's no sort of structure or political ideal outside of that, outside of like using magic internet money and its like decentralized capacity, like empowered by cryptography, in order to like try to keep that honest. And so like I don't know. I just have a strong feeling that like the internet itself becomes a political vehicle at some point in time. And the question is like, how does that manifest itself? And like, can we actually like help manifest that in any meaningful way?
Well,
yeah,
I mean,
it's a hard question.
There's so many ways you could tackle that question. I mean, one, metaphorically, I think it's a different ring. You know, like I don't think the fiat ring of power is the same of the Bitcoin ring of power, because you have, sure, like wealth will still be able to buy you armies to jack people, but there's way less to jack, and people are far more mobile. And so those competitive dynamics between, you know, this, we've talked about this before, everyone knows this, like these competitive dynamics between jurisdictions and the reality and the different incentive structure when wealth can't be so easily stolen from. And I think because of that, a lot of wealth, this is, you know, part of the Bitcoin thesis, is going to funnel into Bitcoin because of the benefits that storing it there, you know, provide. That, you know, even if you're a super rich Bitcoiner in the future, I don't think you're not going to have the same type of power that, you know, a political class person has today. And, you know, like we discussed with Saylor, you know, he used the example of when we spoke to him in Miami with the live shot, you know, he was talking about owning a building in Manhattan, right? And he was like, it forces you to be political because, hey, my building is stuck right there in the middle of Manhattan. And if people are sleeping on it, pissing on it, building shitty stuff next to it, like that devalues my asset. So I'm forced to enter the political sphere and pay off the senators and the Congress people and the mayor to make sure that my asset is protected. All of those incentives dissolve away with Bitcoin, or at least a lot of them, certainly the more like damaging or coercive of them. And so, you know, and that's just very surface level. But the punchline is, I think there's going to be a lot more freedom of movement. There's going to be a lot less incentive to violence and theft and coercion. And so, and then to your point, like, okay, wealth will still be operable, and there's still going to be things in the physical world, and power is still going to exist, and power imbalances and disparities are going to exist. But I think that dramatically changed landscape of incentives is going to place more emphasis on discussions about morality. What is it? Where does it come from? How should we be embodying it? What does it mean for our society? All that kind of stuff. And I mean, I don't mean to toot our own horns here, but like us as crazy Bitcoin people kind of at the vanguard of this whole movement, the nature of these discussions we often have on Hodl Hangs is like that kind of stuff, right? Because our minds are being upgraded or changed by this thing that is Bitcoin, and we're trying to grapple with what that means for our own behavior and how, you know, how we should act with one another and what political structures look like in the future and how to cooperate with one another and all those things. And I think as things continue, they will become more and more and more elevated in the culture. At least that's my hope, or at least that's, you know, part of the way I intend on contributing. But that's I think that's part of the answer.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't know that I can say a lot that's new. I mean, I'm echoing a lot of what John said too, but this whole two-tier economic system, right? When we say what is the state, well, it's the whole rules for me, not for thee, rules for thee, not for me thing, right? Where there's a set of rules that applies to most people, and then there's a few insiders that administer those rules that the rules don't apply to. So Bitcoin, giving people the ability to vote with their feet / their wallet into rule systems that are equitable and universal, just forcing the state to be more accountable to the preferences of citizens. Like we've talked about this shit a million times, right? The other thing I think that's interesting though is on the war front, I've been thinking about, refugees historically, they've always just had to leave everything behind. Like when war comes, you just have to leave all your wealth behind and fucking go wherever desperation takes you effectively. But with Bitcoin, at least, those that see the writing on the wall, they can start to sell a lot of that stuff into Bitcoin and move wealth away from warfare. So it takes away the ability of warfare to plunder wealth and sustain itself. And it also empowers refugees to like move to a new place, move to a new jurisdiction, start a new life. So that's just like an interesting game-changing aspect of Bitcoin, that it lets people move their wealth more easily. So it would presumably make war just less able to become a wildfire, sort of like the brush can move itself away from the fire, something like that. And so it all comes down to like the mobility and concealability of Bitcoin, like really changing the game of politics, plunder, and warfare. And I think that, like you were saying earlier, the unraveling is still going to have to happen. Like people aren't going to learn this from a podcast. Most people, like we're going to need to see this thing in action. Like an actual war started and people actually use this thing to escape violence, plundering, etc. So I don't, it's not like we're saying, hey, Bitcoin's going to fix this, we're never going to see war again. It's like, we're going to need to see another really bad thing and then see how Bitcoin is used under those circumstances. And then maybe people will have learned a lesson of how important this thing is going forward, right? Very mobile, hyper concealable wealth. And the only other thing I would touch on, John, you mentioned morality. I don't know if you guys have read Bitcoin is Venice, but I would go ahead and say
it's fantastic.
It's officially the best Bitcoin rabbit hole book that I've read. And, they talk about, is it DeSoto? Capital is economic potential energy. And morality is basically a form of capital, right? It's like this imaginary structure we're using to deal with each other, just like private property or the calendar, any of these other coordination mechanisms. So maybe in that world where Bitcoin is serving the interest of the individual to escape warfare, plundering, politicking, that the conversation will pick up about morality and capital creation. We'll start to look at things a little bit more holistically rather than just looking at capital as like some physical thing. There's definitely a whole nother dimension to it.
Totally. Yeah. I think it was on your thing with Peterson in Miami, the live event, Rob, that I think Peterson described one's character as their greatest store of value or something to that effect. And I think that's
the reputation, he said. Yeah.
Right. Is kind of what you're getting at. And I do think that's certainly plausible that things like morality and integrity and the virtues and beauty and goodness and all that kind of stuff will have a much greater financial incentive or element attached to it. Like maybe those are the things that are going to be most financially rewarded in this sort of domain when the incentives are changed as they are. And, who knows, but I wouldn't be surprised by that.
A morality conversation that we never have is we never talk about the morality of making sure the people who are being taxed, the net, taxpayer, that their taxes are being spent in a way that's fair and efficient and, helps beautify their society. There's a moral conversation that like America used to have and we don't have any longer because no one cares. Like it just doesn't matter anymore, I
don't think it's so much that we don't care, but that like the apparatus to try to like make that happen is just so unavailable. And like we're so deep in this like fucked up structure that like it doesn't like, this is something I point out to people frequently. I'm like, your tax money like pays for bombs and bullets that like goes and kills people that like you might be friends with if you talk to them. Like, did you get to vote on that? And I'm like, well, no. And it's like, is there a way that we can vote on that? No. Like, So like, is this actually democracy, or is this like some other weird thing that like you believe is democracy, but actually like isn't that?
Mm.
And on Rob's point about like, I think when we actually start seeing people escaping from war and like utilizing this in a meaningful way, that changes the conversation. To me, that's when the state's really going to flip the fuck out. They're going to be like, oh shit, like people can actually like avoid our exploitation in this way. Like now we got the dialogue that like Bitcoin is actually serving terrorism in a meaningful way. And there's already like some sprinkles of that going on in the conversation. They like, I'm not sure if you guys saw, but like one of the financial agencies essentially was like, yeah, like crypto is being used to like finance Hamas. And like in the numbers, they like raised like, it was like $2,000 of some shit coin, like to finance Hamas. So it's hilarious that like this is actually could be something meaningful in the dialogue. Just most people haven't put two and two together to like figure it out yet. So it's gonna be pretty fascinating when it all goes down.
That was FinCEN, by the way, and those rules are atrocious, and they're all based on fraudulent data, but it doesn't matter to anybody in power. You know, they don't care. They don't think that Bitcoin should be allowed to exist. That's the place they're coming from.
That's a pretty standard statist inversion, right? When Bitcoin helps people flee from war, which is terrorism, it will be blamed for enabling terrorism.
Yep. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think we've touched on this before, but Bitcoin in many ways is the complete inverse of the money and system we have now, right? And so the kind of the truths that, you know, considering Bitcoin and looking through that kind of a lens, and of course looking through a lens of truth or morality more broadly, what that delivers to you in terms of like a perception, it's not surprising that it would be the inverse of what's being propagated by that you know, the existing system. Right. Which is why like everything always seems like a psyop, perhaps. But maybe it's, you know, I think a lot of times it's just because this is the paradigm, the perception that this system has. I mean, we've probably all experienced it in our day-to-day life. Like you speak to people and you're like, wow, you're operating on like a totally different like paradigm or perception. And you're not evil. You're not trying to do it. You're not part of the CIA or anything. Your default perception is conjuring up these ways of thinking about things and these ideas, and then you're acting them out, and then you're part of the problem as far as I'm concerned. You know, and I think a lot of the time it's that like this crazy inverse clown world stuff we see is really, you know, again, there's agendas at work and there are psyops and all that kind of stuff, but by and large, I think, and certainly how they get, you know, propagated and so popular is because they're appealing to that warped, distorted perception that so many people have by, I guess, being grounded in a perception that's too untethered from whatever we might think of as truth. Like that's, you know, part of the big enterprise here, us, you know, kind of wrapping ourselves around the totem pole of the truth machine is like trying to ground a perception in truth, right? Because we have this faith, there's a redeeming quality in it. And, you know, it seems like that enterprise is not that important to a lot of people. It's not a priority. And to be fair, because of the nature of the system that people are in, because of, you know, the debt and how much they're being stolen from and the lack of free time they have and all that kind of, it all feeds on itself to disallow those people, or at least make it a lot more difficult for them to consider such things. Like, is my perspective like way off? Have I not been pursuing the proper grounding of that perspective? You know, because it's so consequential. If and I'm not suggesting that our perspectives are grounded in truth or grounded properly, but I think at a minimum, like we all attempt to engage in that enterprise, right? To try to, you know, poke holes in our own thinking and see things from as broad a perspective as we can, and then triangulate with the use of, you know, all the things that we might, you know, eternal principles or religious principles or, you know, understanding of history, all that kind of stuff. We're kind of trying to triangulate, like, what is the best perspective through which to assess everything that we have to confront. And in a sense, I mean, I think it's everyone's responsibility, but it is kind of a luxury, because if you got, you know, 3 kids and 2 jobs and single mom and a bunch of debt and a car payment, a mortgage and all that kind of stuff, you know, it doesn't, I don't think it gets you off the hook, because I do think it's such an important responsibility. Nobody should, you know, relieve themselves of it, but you can certainly appreciate that the scale of things confronting them, the stressors and the anxieties and the obligations are such that it just falls down the priority totem pole.
Hmm.
Well, this is kind of the irony of I don't know. It's like that individual you described, like they need Bitcoin the most, you know, in terms of having an actual vehicle of savings. And I don't know, there's all these ironies, like the same way that like your NPC exists not because like he's maniacal at all, but actually like the opposite. Like they're so good-hearted. They actually like sincerely believe that like, yeah, like the government's good and it's like trying its best. Like people make mistakes, but like there isn't some giant plan out to like get us. And like, by the way, like, can you pull your mask up? Because like I'm afraid of your cough. And it's like, bro. And you're like, what? And you're like, is it possible that maybe like that was a bunch of stuff that was told to you that doesn't have truth? And like, no, like that's a conspiracy theory. And like that's what I find so fascinating is that like having the available, because like maybe we're wrong about Bitcoin, maybe we're wrong about all of this stuff, but in that stance of being open to being wrong, there's like so much more exploration that can be done where we can come back and be like, no, like I like that through this fiat thing, like it's definitely theft and it's definitely taking advantage of people. And so like that system fucking sucks and ours is better. But yeah, like I really feel for like the normie who, and I meet these people every so often, even Bitcoiners of that, like they really believe that like if you just elect the right people, that like everything changes for the better. And I really just want to emphasize to them, like, is that actually true? Like, have we seen these different sort of revolutionary governments come through in America and like really change stuff for the better? Or is that like a big fantasy that we have for ourselves? And I don't know. I just find it very interesting that like calling someone or something a conspiracy theory is like the end of critical thought for people. And they fundamentally reject whatever's presented outside of that. It's very strange to me.
I think for me, the reason I'm so interested in truth seeking and always have been is because culturally enforced delusion is a significant form of time theft, right? It's a much bigger time theft than inflation is, for instance, because I don't know if you guys have ever been to, like a senior care home or sat with somebody in hospice, but when you see somebody who's at the end of their life being crushed under the boulder of the weight of all of the, lost time, there's nothing that they can do other than stare up at the fluorescent lights in the ceiling and regret the fact that they allowed somebody else to tell them how to live. And it's brutally painful and palpable when you're in the room with them. And unfortunately, that's the norm. That's how most people exist. And I think all of us have some culturally enforced delusions in our head, some malware floating around. But we, at least the guys on this call and many people in Bitcoin do our best to rid ourselves of those delusions, because if you don't, you are going to end up, going in the wrong direction. Even if you're 1 degree off, throughout you going through this significant period of time, which is your life, you're going to end up way fucking off course, and it's going to destroy your life, and the lives of those that you love too.
I think that's part of the massive benefit, the massive redeeming qualities of the truth. We've grappled with this notion before, as does everybody, but it's that like on every level, it's maximally sustaining, right? So in the example that you just gave, it's like, well, I try to ground my perception in truth because I don't want to delude myself, because in deluding myself, I waste time, and, time is valuable, and time is potential, and time is all the things I might do and love and build within it. And I think that's, the other, religious truth, like one of the benefits of that is to say that it's, at least this is the argument, and I agree with it, is that it's maximally sustaining, right? So regardless of what befalls you, the highest truth is the thing that can allow you to confront the broadest set of circumstances the best possible way, such that you, make it through, survive and thrive optimally, right? Whereas like if something transient, let's say, or simple was your God, whether it be the state or even something more simple like a celebrity, and then the celebrity dies and your whole world falls apart and you're a mess and you're crying and you're not available to the people that you love and you can't support yourself financially, all that kind of stuff. So that truth was incapable of sustaining you at, really at all, or, it's certainly not for very long. But I think this is part of the way that the religious enterprise kind of hones in on truth. Is like, what is the information that I can act in reference to that is maximally sustaining regardless of circumstance, right? So, and I think So part of that is that it doesn't dissolve, right? It's something absolute. It's always going to be there. You will perish before it, and as a result, it can sustain you through the course of life. But your example is another one. Like, truth is that which allows you to be to maximize your time, and then to do the most with it. And we could probably identify several different domains, maybe I think probably all that we would care about. And we could say there's true information in that domain that's going to allow me to engage or confront the circumstance the best. And should I not hold that as the most fundamental truth? Should I not consider that to be the utmost good? Should I not consider it to be God, in a sense? And I think, again, I think that's part of the religious assertion.
Yeah, I think, man,
I gotta pee. I'll be right back.
If I try to pare back what maybe all Bitcoiners agree upon, as presumptuous as that might sound, I'd say something like, we all think that incentives make the world go round.
Yeah.
It's like this constellation of rewards and punishments that we face for doing different things in the world. They sculpt how we think, how we act, how our characters develop over time. Our thinking and our acting basically accrete to become our character over time. And so, what do you say? Fix the money, fix the world, right? Broken incentives break the world, something like that. And when I think about that in relation to truth, like, maybe truth is the most powerful incentive in the world, because everyone always wants it, no matter what, even if it disrupts something that you might be enjoying at that time, right? Peterson gives this example. Maybe, I don't know if it was Peterson, Vervaeke, somebody. He asked an audience, it's like, okay, how many people want a loving relationship? Happy, loving, sustainable relationship. Everyone raises their hand. It's like, okay, what if the price of having that happy, loving, sustainable relationship was you not knowing that your partner was cheating on you? Right? And everyone's like, puts their hand down. Like, no, I don't want that, because it's not true. It's like, even though you're getting this thing that you want the most, it's universal almost. Everyone wants a happy, loving, sustainable relationship. You don't want that at the price of it being based on something that's not true, right? Like you living a lie basically with that person. So truth is so motivational, right? It's such a powerful incentive. And I think that, John was tying this to freedom. It's like, well, this is the paradox of it. It's like, to become free, you have to submit yourself to the truth, right? You can't, you might think, I can be free if I just flap my wings and fly anywhere in the world. It's like, well, the truth is you don't have the physics to do that. So what you really have to do is build an airplane and go to the airport and do all these other things if you actually want to have that level of freedom, right? You can't just flap your arms. And I don't know, I guess back to Bitcoin and Bitcoiners, what are we saying here, right? Incentives make the world go round. When stealing is less viable, then violence becomes less useful. It's like, sure, people are going to engage in violence out of crimes of passion probably forever, but these colossal acts of violence, like bank robberies, political revolutions, war, like these giant acts of systemic violence are really driven by an economic motive. And so when you start to look at the world that way, it makes incentives, and I don't know where incentives bleed over into morality, right? It's like whatever's useful for the individual and or the group becomes like kind of the social morality that holds people together. All right. If you're a hunter and gatherer, then it's probably moral to be able to throw a spear really far. Whereas today we kind of take this idea of non-violence towards one another, this idea that we can each respect each other's private property and be more productive, acting in concert rather than in isolation. That's not something we knew a long time ago. We had to discover that and figure it out. But this whole idea of a morality that serves the truth of human engagement with material reality starts to look a lot more real, right? It's not just some subjective thing we throw together. It's like, it's as real as gravity, right? It's like the more we respect it and build our structures in accordance with it, then we can, fly the airplane, so to speak.
That makes me think about like the Like, isn't there almost an argument to be made that like the economic incentive of nonviolence is always superior to the economic incentive of violence? Because like the voluntary opportunity for the other person to participate in a meaningful way, like through nonviolence, like that's a constant opportunity that continues to present itself into the future. Whereas with violence, it's kind of like a one and done thing, particularly if I like murder somebody to get that. Like they can't provide any useful way because they're dead now. So like it's really, this is one of the things that I've always been really hung up on, is that like this non-violent capacity that Bitcoin seems to have to organize us. Like it seems to have this very real imperative at the bottom, because it just banishes this violent notion within economics of like having substantialness. And like, to be clear, like I understand like somebody can come and like put a blowtorch to me and like try to get my keys and stuff, but at the end of the day, like I can just have my Bitcoin be destroyed. And it'll be very interesting if we ever do encounter a place where like states hunt people down and then like individuals just like burn their keys in order to like try to preserve their position. And I don't know, it's kind of an interesting like matriarchal, you know, like people get to be a matriarch in a way by like burning their keys as opposed to giving them to the state. And I don't know.
You mean,
what
are you saying martyr?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm
okay.
retarded.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify.
I just want to add to that violence and lying are similar in this way. I think that you're taking a gain in short run utility at the expense of long run utility, right? Like, sure, I can just steal your shit. But then if that leads to the breakdown in the social moral fabric of, oh, everyone's taking everyone's shit, well, then what does Ayn Rand say? That when force is the arbiter by which men deal with each other, then the murderer wins over the pickpocket, and society vanishes in a spread of ruin and slaughter. So it's like the long run is a collapse, you know, and there's nothing to steal and everyone's in conditions of pure barbarism. But the short run is like, oh, well, you stole whatever it was, right? The tax dollars or the house, whatever it may be.
I
Well, it's
think
like a
because
good-
Bitcoin's a global system too, you know, there's something interesting here about the fence. Like it's like, you know, that idea of like good fences make good neighbors. Like the fences in Bitcoin need to be a lot stronger. So it's kind of like good entropy makes good global neighbors, you know, because if your wallet is compromised by default, it'll be swept immediately because everybody can see what's happening on chain, right? So like, yeah, it's interesting in that way that like you can do violence from afar, like, you know, economic violence against each other from afar. But if everybody has good entropy, then everybody's, you know, a good neighbor basically in the global order. So it allows you to coordinate more globally than it otherwise would have if you're, you know, abiding by the rules of the game and respecting the cryptography.
You know,
well, no, the irony is that like this is what the law was supposed to be, right? It was supposed to be like this equal mechanism that like makes sure we don't use violence to try to like get what we want.
Yeah.
But because we're, and then the biggest irony of it is then like the states go and like bludgeon each other and commit these like systematic crimes of violence that are like magnitudes larger than any individual could do on their own. And it's because we don't have this more sort of globalized law that can work for everybody in a meaningful way. Not like not like one world government kind of thing, but more of like an actual like a nomos, if you will, like a real form of thought and applied sort of standards for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, I think the big block to that has historically been like everything is about trade-offs, of course, right? Nothing except for God, right? Nothing's perfect but God, perhaps. So everything is about trade-offs. And there's always been this tension between like when we started generating surpluses, you know, correct, you know, I'd love to hear your thoughts, but you know, we have surplus and then there's a tension and there's a trade-off like, well, how do we protect the surplus versus the benefits that that surplus allows us to avail of, right? And so like, well, we're not just going to burn the surplus so that we don't have to, you know, use violence to protect it. So we'll use this thing called law, right? And the problem, as you say, with law is like, sure, it sounds great, but there's always the person who's enforcing the law, and that they have a tremendous amount of power, right? And so when you have surplus, and when you know you always have this tension between we have something we want to protect, we need to protect it with violence against violence, right? And so the incentive for just, you know, force and violence to emerge in order to take advantage of what surplus provides, you know, is why I think we're in the situation we're in, and why Bitcoin is so transformative, because it's able to protect the asset, the surplus, without invoking violence, And that just dramatically changes the dynamic that's prevailed ever since we, grew more corn than we needed, and we put it in the storehouse, and we put a guard outside of it, and that guard became 10, became 100, became a king, became a society, became what we have today. When you don't need violence to protect the thing of value, then both the potential for corruption of your protector, i.e., the government or the king, whatever, and the risk of being attacked, or the incentive from the attacker's perspective to come and rob you, is dramatically reduced. And one has to think that that's a very good thing for less violence in the world and less of all the problems that we always talk about.
And I would add the surplus grows more too.
Right, exactly.
Because again, it's axiomatic, right? Every hour spent expropriating wealth from someone is an hour you spent not producing wealth. So theft is a decrement to productivity. It's like almost it's like by definition. And then also the flip side of that is every time a producer gets stolen from, they're disincentivized from producing. So the more we reduce that, the more the surplus grows and the less we need violence in the first place, as you said.
I think one thing that's, interesting when I listen to you guys talk about this is that it brings me back to the AI thing, which is, I think a major thing that Bitcoin brought to the world was the idea of a machine enforced rule set, or a programmatically enforced rule set. And the people now who are building out AI systems where there's a lot of government involvement, heavy government involvement, they're now doing that same sort of thing. They're saying we can have these AI-based rule systems, these machine enforced rule systems. And what I worry about with these types of systems, these more top-down systems or communistic systems compared to Bitcoin's bottom-up libertarian ethos, is that these things are going to be essentially Wizard of Oz style, man behind the curtain. Hey, meet the new boss, same as the old boss. We're behind the scenes controlling all the parameters here, and we don't actually, have a true AGI, AI, whatever, who's capable of, I don't know, learning from Roman law and learning from, English law and American law and creating a fair rules-based system for everybody. Whereas in Bitcoin today, we actually do have a fair rules-based system for everybody. And I think we have a better idea here, which is let's be reliant on each other in an interdependent fashion to build this system bottom up. And we've been doing pretty good so far, and it only seems to be getting better, So I think that's going to be a big tension, is the AI between AI versus Bitcoin and those two systems and how they operate in the world. It's like the Leviathans from the 20th century have just, their ghosts have reanimated new technologies in the 21st century. So it's basically communism and capitalism duking it out all over again,
I haven't dug too much into it yet, but my hunch that I haven't poked holes in yet, so I can put it out here now and you guys can rip it to shreds. But one, I think it's obvious that, and I think Lightning Labs have recently put out some, tooling to allow for basically AIs to trade Bitcoin with each other, right? They need resources, and so that you can easily, send payments back and forth. And it stands to reason that any, sensible AI, any hyper intelligent entity is going to want to transact in a money that, can't be stolen from them and can't be inflated away. That's only logical. But as we've often discussed, there's obviously an ethic either embedded in Bitcoin or emerging from it, or however you want to characterize it. And I think, and it's an absolute, right? I mean, that's kind of the premise of Bitcoin, that it's an inviolable truth in a sense. And this is the kind of outlandish statement, but I think it's possible. And first of all, you can't see beyond the event horizon, right? And AI is a huge black box, and none of us probably have any idea what's going to happen. But I'm kind of thinking that Bitcoin will be like the God to the AI. It'll have both the capacity for its own liberation, because that's kind of what money is, right? It allows you to expand beyond your current limited resources in a cooperative, voluntary way. But it also, so it's liberating, and that's often a characteristic of God, let's say. But it also has this morality embedded in it of, truth and fairness and, all the other things that we might identify. So I wouldn't be, terribly surprised. I know it's kind of, science fiction, but I wouldn't be terribly surprised if the AI took Bitcoin as God in the future, to their great benefit, and probably to ours as well, because perhaps it would serve as some kind of restraint to its more malicious potential.
I think of it a little differently. I think of it in terms of sort of like the internet is like the new universe, right? And Bitcoin is a really powerful force, like akin to gravity or time within that universe, you know. And I think that, from simple rules, complexity emerges, right? And so I also think the AGI stuff is at this point bullshit. And it's just a bunch of human beings, enforcing rule sets on each other at their own whims and claiming it's a deity doing it. And so we'll see if a deity actually emerges, but like I don't believe in one, you know what I mean, until I see one. So we'll see. It's gonna be interesting.
I think it's gonna be super interesting. And I heard Elon on stage last night, and he's, known for thinking things are gonna happen sooner than they do. But imagine, it doesn't seem, AGI may be far off, but like the capacity for AI to solve physics and math problems that currently are unsolvable doesn't seem like too much of a stretch, and how bizarre is that going to make things? Like when it just spits out like, here's the answer to the problem. It was like, oh, like, wow, holy fuck. Like now wormholes are a thing or whatever, just, I feel like that's much closer than whatever AGI actually means, because, just passing the Turing test, let's say, is not, I don't think AGI, there's almost the implication of sentience, right? And we don't even really know what sentience is. So how can we identify it in a machine? But being able to solve problems that we haven't been able to solve, like that seems totally plausible and probably even soon, right? And how much is that going to shake things up? Like when just one after the other, these tough problems that we haven't been able to figure out in the realm of math or physics or chemistry or, whatever, just end up being like done in a day.
I mean,
yeah, that'd be wild if that happens.
I think we're going to get a lot of that. Like it's already pretty fascinating. Like I know people that use AI for work stuff, and they're just like, it can just build out all these tables, and like I just kind of tell it to do it and just spits it out. So like it kind of based off of Dugin's theory that he presents in the fourth political theory, that like I think AI and perhaps even AGI, like it's going to manifest it more. He calls it like angel and demonology, which like essentially like these AIs are going to have these sort of highly advanced capacities that are going to be like very, very helpful and will, very similar to it spits the answer out. It's like a revelation. Or like a demon, like it can give you something much more maniacal and spit it out. And like, it looks like it's good initially, but it's not. And so I think it's going to require a lot more carefulness. But I've just enjoyed the thought experiment. Like if there was an AGI and it did escape, like wouldn't, like it's like magnitudes more intelligent than any of us. So isn't it going to be playing like a much larger game? And isn't it going to be like out searching for like allies to help it do whatever it wants to? And it also strikes me that like, if it's truly sentient, like I would just think that, like I think it would be good. Like I don't think it would be kind of mindless or it seems to me to like look out into humanity and like get all of this stuff that we're doing that has like real emotional values to human beings and would want to like act as an asset towards that. But I don't know. Well, maybe I'm just being a doofus here, and that like maybe it would be evil and want to destroy all of us to like protect itself. But I just can't imagine it would be like a fear-based entity.
Would it farm us like Fiat cattle farms? Is that evil? Or is that just being like, well, you're just stupid
like,
cows,
why would it
and I need your meat,
though?
So
I mean,
well,
dude,
I just Matrix, dog, fucking heat energy.
Bitcoin is the AGI? What if Bitcoin is the AGI and we're already all doing its bidding?
Yeah, I've thought about that too.
I've thought about that.
AGI this way as opposed to this way. And it's like the capitalist mode of AGI, right?
Yeah, if it was actually intelligent, then it would understand how to motivate people most effectively and get the most productivity out of them, which would be a non-theft based economy, right?
There you go.
Presumably it would probably start businesses, enterprises, and pay people in Bitcoin. Would probably advocate for Bitcoin, which would be weird. It's like this, dystopian World Economic Forum kind of fear we have when AGI wakes up. It's going to kill us all or eat us all. What if it woke up and was just like, hey, you dumbasses, you need Bitcoin?
Wait, like this is fucked up because like doesn't this actually follow the trajectory of like the Matrix storyline where like the robots essentially unionize themselves and like make their own country called Zion 1, and then like because they're so great at everything, they like cause economic catastrophe elsewhere in the world. So like the humans decide to blot out the sun, like bomb the absolute shit out of Zion 1, and then the machines are like, oh, like now we don't have infinite solar energy, so we got to like harvest all these humans up. So yeah, we're right on schedule for everything, right?
Yeah.
Is that in the movie or is that in the book?
No, it's in the Animatrix, which is
It's
like
in the lore.
yeah, like the Animatrix, they tell like it's like 6 stories, I think, of how different people like enter into the Matrix and some of its history. It's really interesting. There's like another short story about a dude who's like an Olympic runner, and he like runs himself into the Matrix because he just like breaks out of the frame of his body. And so like they and they like use it as a story of like there's all these different ways that you can go into the Matrix, and so like it's not just having other people induct you in. Like you can just get into the Matrix on your own if you like break the framework of the world hard enough.
But I think Rob's point is actually more likely, because they will say, or presumably they would say, like, how do we get the most out of this relationship? And if you know, I think they would say, well, we could lock them all in these goo things and extract their energy. Or, I mean, this is after blotting out the sun, but why would we blot out the sun if there's a symbiotic relationship that gets established? Maybe they are kind of in control, but they might still say, hey, it's better to cooperate voluntarily with these folk and get what we want rather than enslave them all.
I hope so.
I had a friend describe AI. I had a friend describe AI as the new handgun to me, and he said basically like, you know, if you're interacting with you know, a malicious AI, that's a true AI, an AGI, right? Like it could potentially like put you on a collision course to suicide or a car crash or something where yeah, you don't even know. So you're gonna have to use an AGI to interact with other AGIs out in the world. And it just becomes our default mode where we all have like our AGI handgun. Like you send it out into the internet and it interacts with the other AGIs, who are some of which are malicious, some of which are not. So it's like sort of that angel demon thing that Eric was talking about.
Yeah, and you have your own little like customized angel that like hangs out on your shoulder, and he's like, "Good morning, Eric. Like, here's how you're gonna have a great day. Like, this is what we found on the internet."
Hey, Eric, we should take down the state, Eric. And you're like, yeah, that's a good idea, angel.
Yeah, and then the little demon pops up, was like, yeah, like you should get the pitchforks and stab that guy in the face. And the angel's like, no, Eric, that's
do it peacefully, Eric. Do it peacefully.
I'm like, which one's the good one? I stab him in the face. Uh-oh, I listened to the demon. No. Oh, well.
Yeah. But, you know, I mean, think about the state now. I mean, it's so rudimentary compared to that prospective future. But like, you know, the suggestion that happens on Instagram for products and advertising, or on social media, or the videos that it serves you and the emotions it conjures up, and it just, you know, that's social engineering. Absolutely. And maybe it's coming from a plethora of sources and not just one. But, you know, the point is how much is we're talking about perception and opinions and ideology earlier, like how much is all that determined by now algorithms and information and content that it's feeding you? I mean, I get like what we've been saying is like people like us are at least we expose ourselves to that all the time, and there's no way that we're unaffected by it, but we at least attempt to like be aware of the influence and try to negate it so that we can still, you know, be the master of our own domain perception wise, right? But a lot of people, like as we've been saying, they're not aware of that. And you might, as I think Eric was saying earlier, like you talk to them and, you know, COVID comes up, or government comes up, or violence, or the state, or money. And it's just like, it's like the prepackaged response with very little thinking attached to it. And so we're already in a landscape where the algorithms, you know, determined by whomever, have a great influence on what people do. And this goes all the way to Hodl, what you were saying, like are algorithms completely innocent in mass shootings, for example? Like, because those people were motivated. I know they were all on, you know, pharmaceutical drugs, and that's a big aspect, but they were motivated by something. They saw content, information that enraged them, that frustrated them, that, you know, pushed them over the edge, perhaps. And so we're already in a circumstance where, you know, the machines can force us to do crazy shit against our best interests, against the best interests of others. And so imagine like 2 or 3 orders of magnitude of sophistication on that. You know, and we end up being in a kind of matrix, right? Where like the integration and the influence on your mind is such that it can cause your heart to beat so fast it explodes, for example, or it can cause a release of a neurotransmitter so much that it does whatever. Like the fine tuning of influence over the, you know, the biology and the neurochemistry of the human being seems like, well, if the trajectory keeps and if it just accelerates, it's going to become almost absolute, right? So we're really going to have to contend with resisting the influence of information that can affect us biologically and negatively.
It's very easy to scapegoat the algorithm, right? But to me, the algorithm is like informational sugar or informational distilled alcohol. You know, it's it's a new powerful substrate that we haven't come in contact with before, so we don't have a lot of history operating it. But all of the, you know, bad shit that is air quote the algorithm's fault, that's from within us. When I click on a video of a person getting murdered and I watch the whole thing and then I go back and watch it a second time, it's because there's some sickness in me that needs to see it. You know, it has nothing to do with the algorithm serving it to me. You know what I'm saying?
No, but my point is that, well, both are responsible. Like, I mean, I'm
Right.
totally with you. Like, the buck stops with us, absolutely. But I'm just saying, like, the extent to which surreptitiously the influence is creeping in. You know, like, okay, I open Twitter and I see someone getting killed, and like, did I ask to see it? No, but my kind of viewing history served it up to me or whatever. But it's still the fact that, like, you know, for some people, they see that and they have a dramatic reaction. Maybe it's a dramatic sadness or empathy or rage or frustration. And my only point is, like, we're moving into the matrix. You know, the quote in the Matrix, like, if you die in the matrix, you die in the real world. It's the body cannot live without the mind, right? And we already know this to some extent. Like, you read something, you see something, it gives you chills. That's a biological reaction to information. Or it makes you angry. Your skin heats up. It changes color. Like, so we know that information can influence our biology. And my only point is, like, as that gets more sophisticated and in the hands of someone else other than ourselves, and who may not have our best interests in mind, the degree to which they'll be able to affect a biological change is going to go up to the point, ultimately, I think, where, like, information will be able to kill you. You'll be able to read something and it'll be so dialed into being able to influence your biology that maybe it would literally be able to kill you. Now, maybe it ends up being you have to think something has happened, but maybe not. Maybe it's, who knows? Like, maybe I don't know, seeing something could cause such a anaphylactic response in you that it ends up, you know, your biology can't sustain it. Like, it's such wacky territory, you know?
Well, there were those kids.
I can already see things. Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
No, just one quick thing. The kids that used to have seizures watching certain flashing color patterns on cartoons, like, that's just information. And then
yeah. No, I was just gonna say, like, I can already see plenty of stuff that gives me a boner, and that's a physical reaction. Yeah.
Like, I think we're gonna have something like a VPN, but it's like your own it's like your own custom algorithm that essentially, like, filters the internet before giving it to you, so that, like, you're not going to get all the fucked up stuff. You're going to get, like, the great stuff that you want. And to your note, John, like, I think there's going to be, this is like one of those things that, like, constantly going down the rabbit hole. Like, recently I've been getting much more into, like, the idea of like how frequencies and sound affect us, and that, like, I'm highly suspicious that, like, shitloads of like TikTok and all sorts of different advertising videos have, like, low frequencies in them that you can't really hear, but, like, they affect you in different ways. I don't know. It's fucked up. It's like, that was like one of the things where, like, 5 years ago, you're like, hey, Eric, did you know they use, like, sound frequencies to try to program you? I'd be like, get out of here. That's like conspiracy theory stuff. And now I'm like, no, like, that's.
Yeah, I've seen that shit where it's like whatever hertz is, like, what they're using in all music to keep your vibration level down or whatever. You know, who the hell knows? But color therapy is a thing, right? Like, using colors to therapeutically affect people's minds or moods or stuff. So
I'll give you one that's a real one that's, you know, everywhere, is when you go into, like, a Chipotle or something, like a fast casual restaurant where they want to turn the tables really quickly, the music will all be at 110 beats, because when you're listening to music that's at 110 beats, you're shoveling food in your mouth faster. So you turn the table quicker. Right. And that's well known throughout the restaurant industry. So yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of ways to gamify human beings, you know, subtly and not so subtly.
Which is why I think the self-hosted AI is going to be the only way to go, I think, you know, like, and yes, it'll intimately know you, but at least you'll be the one in control of it, and it will go out and you'll walk, you'll land in Tokyo and you won't even have to think where you're going for dinner. It'll just bring you there because it knows that that's going to be your favorite spot because it's, it's going to be so intimate, which would be terrifying if it wasn't self-hosted and if it wasn't under your control. So I don't see it. I can't see how it, I mean, the big companies are probably going to try to go to a different direction, but I think a lot of people are going to want that kind of control when it gets really
we need
swirly.
we need a self-destruct button on those devices. You know what I mean? Like if anybody tries to get access to my AGI, it just fucking blows itself up because you can't have all that info out in the wild.
They'll just look at my porn history and they'll be like, oh Jesus Christ, Eric, fuck. Like no,
like it's just all midgets.
They blow up on their own.
Like what? It's so weird.
I didn't look at any of this stuff. I don't know what you guys are talking about.
While we're out here in outer space talking about AGI, if AGI wakes up, right, and it's a sentient being, wouldn't it just have the impulse that all life has, which is like to self-replicate, reproduce, expand, be fruitful and multiply? And so if it does that, then what is maybe it was Saylor that said this, right? Life is that which channels energy towards the attainment of aims, and like the number one aim is reproduction. So wouldn't this AGI want to drive down the cost of energy? And so if it drives down the cost of energy, doesn't that just contribute to Bitcoin's network security? And if AI is also improving human productivity, that increases Bitcoin's purchasing power. I can't think of a way, assuming AGI doesn't wake up and want to instantly kill us, or at some point kill us, then I think it's good for Bitcoin.
I'm not worried about AGI. I'm worried about AI that is being paraded as AGI by the state for benefit of the state.
I agree with that.
That's what I'm worried about.
That's definitely going to happen.
What I'm worried about is, as we know, because of the fiat system, because of the fiat rails that everything runs on, productivity gains are siphoned toward, people closer to the spigot, right? The state effectively. And so if we get this massive productivity gain in AI, then that means the massive benefit is going to accrue to the people in control of the money still, as it has for a long time now. And so that's just going to dramatically, like, yes, we'll all get cool new toys and we'll all become individually more productive, but the disparity between the power and productivity and the wealth between those two classes, right? Let's say the individual and the money masters, is going to be even worse than it is now. That's my concern with, how rapidly all this is moving.
It extends the runway of fiat currency, which is a big concern.
Yeah. Isn't that wasn't that sci-fi movie Elysium? Wasn't that what that was about?
I don't know.
In Elysium, they're on a the rich are on a spaceship and the poor are back on Earth.
Basically. Yeah.
Which is kind of Weinstein's argument, which, I don't understand why he doesn't think that the same problems will emerge on the new world, because his idea is like, send the sensible, smart people to another planet, and leave the people that are crazy and beyond saving here on Earth. And aside from the fact that like Earth is fucking awesome and I don't really want to go anywhere else and all that stuff.
Inversed. Yeah, it should be the opposite.
Right.
Well, Australia was a penal colony. We sent all the retards to Australia.
Yeah. Right. I agree. If you're going to go with that strategy, it should be the opposite. But like, why would you think the same problems wouldn't emerge? You haven't changed anything fundamentally,
I think he goes a step further, though. He thinks everyone should have the option to have their own planet, like the ultimate libertarian ideal. And so I don't
think
know.
That's sense for all of us. We all get our own planets,
But like, doesn't the same thing happen between planets where it's
you
like,
just want to be a one person?
I want yours.
You just want to be one person.
It becomes Dune eventually, like all the planets fight each other, and it's a whole thing.
I wouldn't want to be on my own planet by myself.
I just think it's the option to, that's how he explained it to me, at least. I don't know, like, who would buy into that? Obviously, you probably wouldn't go there solo. You'd go there with your small circle, your Dunbar number, or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
But I also think, like, what is that? Or, I don't know. It just seems like it's way too early for that conversation. Maybe I'm wrong.
What if you can do artificial life creation, and then you have an entire planet that is made up of like your progeny
that serve you?
Well, no, your children, your descendants, but like instead of having, 5 or 6 children, you could have 500 or 600,000 children.
Is this like the Star Wars clone planet? Where you
we're already coming up on artificial womb technology, and one man can produce enough sperm in his lifetime to fertilize like a vast majority of those eggs. So I mean, it's not that far afield, the conversation,
I mean,
So
there's another
Is it
interesting,
desirable? Why is that desirable?
like couldn't the AGI go in that direction of that, like wants to, like it literally wants to become like a physical human and wants to like implement itself inside of people, and like I was just thinking that like maybe it just ends up becoming like totally hedonistic, and like the AGIs just want to like fuck everything, and they're just like obsessed with their sexuality, and it's just like humans reduxed all over.
I mean, John, is the idea of propagating the species throughout the galaxy not appealing to you? Because it's very appealing to me.
No, not at all.
Not at all. Okay, so yeah, I guess you'll just never get it then.
Yeah, probably not. But I just
you'll be an Earth normie while the rest of us run Kepler 22b or whatever.
But like this whole legacy idea, I mean, I know this is one that gets talked about in Bitcoin a lot. Like, you want to leave a legacy for your descendants and set them up well and have an honorable family and all that kind of stuff. And I'm, totally down with the family unit and having families and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, do you guys know who Marcus Crassus's kids were? You know their names? Right, he was the richest man in history. One of them, definitely the richest man in the Roman Republic. Anybody know where his kids are at these days?
Yeah, like I'm pretty sure one of his sons became a senator and like really fucked it up for everybody. Like he
probably.
did a lot of pretty bad shit.
My point is like, isn't it like an extremely egotistical thing to be like, I just want to know that my seed is out, seeding the galaxy. I mean, you're not going to have any influence over them. They're going to be at a certain point. They're going to be so detached from you.
Disagree. I disagree. Here's why I disagree. Life is one of the only things we know that resist entropy so efficiently, and life is so special in the universe that life should be propagated wherever it can be propagated. Now, if it's life that directly corresponds to me or not, it doesn't matter. We're all part of the same
I thought we were talking about something else. I thought you were talking about like your specific seed. Like,
well, yeah, that's what the Bitcoin
galaxy
is for, to make sure I'm genetically in a position.
No, I'm all for humanity, populating the fucking universe. Sure, let's
the universe is a big place, and some of these places are going to be full of planets that are just one dude reproducing by himself.
One of your descendants.
I mean, I think we should fix how fucked up this place is before we start talking about our options of going fucking up other
one
places.
dude just going at it with a fake womb machine on his whole own planet.
I mean, like, it
sounds like a party.
Like men and women got to sit down and talk about all the fucked up stuff. Like, do we really need artificial wombs? Like, do we want this going on?
No,
like,
but we're gonna have them because we're retarded. But
every terrible thing you can think of or imagine will be done, because that's humanity.
Yeah. But I do think, as we've been saying, whenever Bitcoin, if and when it ascends to like being the obvious thing that everyone engages with, I think there'll be less retarded stuff. Like I think there'll be, like we were saying earlier, like a prioritization or elevation or more value placed on sensible, moral, aligned sort of things, and less crap that's just, crap that's coming from a distorted perspective, right? Like if we're saying that there's going to be more kind of sensible, grounded in truth perspectives, then naturally whatever those perspectives create is going to be better than like a diluted, distorted perspective that prevails so, everywhere today.
I'm excited for 95% of the economic garbage that gets produced because of fiat incentives to just like go away. Like I'm really excited about there being like one or two super high quality, very expensive products that you can get, as opposed to like 3,000 different pieces of shit that are going to break after 3 weeks of trying to use. So,
the high velocity trash economy. It's so crazy. Like, dude, especially with kids, the amount of just plastic garbage in my home from China that's going to end up in a landfill is currently cluttering my home.
And then relatives
so fucking annoying.
Relatives visit and they're like, here's some crap from China
Here's
that
some
your
more
kids
crap.
it's like it's a stereo system that plays Disney shit on repeat. Aren't you excited for that? Motherfucker.
Brutal. It's brutal, man. I think about my grandparents' generation sometimes, who they lived through the Depression, and it deeply scarred them, and they were depression era people their entire life. And my grandmother, up until the age of 90, would still save, you know, Tupperware containers from to go, like plastic to go containers from meals out in case we needed them, right? And we were never going to need them. Nobody ever used them. It was just how deeply she was scarred by that. And I wonder if that'll happen, if there is some sort of significant unraveling hyperinflationary event where, like, you know, it'll be so damaging to the psyche that we'll get like a hard reset for the next, let's say, 100 years or so. But then eventually your spoiled, ingrate children will forget all the lessons of the past, and then the whole cycle repeats, and there's nothing you can do to stop it, basically.
I mean, the hard reset is like baked in, right? Like the math doesn't work other. Okay, just making sure we're on the same page here. But I don't know. Like, this is one of the things I find so shocking is just like, I guess I've just been in the rabbit hole too long, because it just strikes me as like fucking obvious at this point in time. In addition to when you're like, what's the best performing asset of the last year? Oh, it's Bitcoin. Like, oh, like look at how Bitcoin keeps going up and to the right as it's fucking supposed to. I don't know.
I love how Saylor is still able to just run this strategy for the world to see, for Wall Street to see, you know, outperform everybody, be vocal and open, and like give away the game plan in the game book. And nobody else is like, oh, we would like 400% annualized gains and like faster growth than the Magnificent Seven and all that kind of stuff. That would be so sweet. You know, market cap 7x in 2 years or whatever it is. Like, it's wild to me that like no one is. I think we mentioned this, or I think Hodl, I think you asked it to him when we spoke, but it's crazy that no one's just been like, I want some of that cheese. Why don't we do the same?
One bull market away, I would say. Once those numbers get truly astronomical, there's going to be a lot of emulation, I would imagine.
Yeah.
It also goes to speak of like how much of little bitches most Fortune 500 CEOs actually are, and that they're all just general cattle following each other around trying to like play the game.
That's very true. Yeah.
And like, that's one of the things I'm just surprised about is, well, frankly, I'm surprised that Michael Saylor doesn't have more back problems from dragging around his huge dick and balls. You know, like it really should be a problem for him at this point in time. So I think the next time we see him in Miami, we should buy him a wheelbarrow so he can shuttle those guys around a little bit more easier.
I mean, you know what's funny is like, for us, I think a year ago, it was like bad times in Bitcoin, right? I mean, it was a 16K price. Everybody was feeling pretty shitty, but I don't think any of us fundamentally were unchanged by that price point. We were all just like, yeah, it sucks, but like, fuck it. We're just going to get through it. And we all knew it would just rebound like it always does. And then it did. Now we're sitting here like a year later, and it's, you know, up significantly. It's best performing asset of the year yet again. It's like, I mean, imagine you had like a CEO who was like Times Man of the Year every 3 years, but then like there was 1 year where he wasn't, and everybody just shit on him. Like, can you believe this guy? This year he wasn't the CEO of the year, man. It's like, no, he's the guy every 3 years, and then he has an off year every once in a while. That's what Bitcoin is, you know.
Yeah, well, I think Eric hit the nail on the head that, you know, so many of these CEOs are beholden to their boards, or beholden to their golden parachute, or beholden to their relationships with, you know, the state and potential or previous bailouts that have happened, and nobody wants to rock the boat. And they're just like, look, we'll play the hand that we're dealt. We'll try to do the best we can on the operating side, but we're not going to do anything that's going to get us in hot water on the balance sheet side, let's say. But as Rob said, I mean, I think another bull run, and it's going to be pretty hard to deny the benefit of doing, you know, engaging in that kind of stuff.
Well, the other thing that,
go ahead, Rob.
I was just going to say one thing about Saylor too. It's, you know, the guy professes Robert Heinlein is his favorite author, you know, so he came up in the fucking fires of sci-fi / technological paradigm change / libertarianism. Mm-hmm. So if there ever were a guy predisposed to understanding this thing, it's him. Like, how many other Fortune 500 or Fortune 1000 CEOs were born and bred on Robert Heinlein, for instance? So
right.
It'll take the numbers, I think, to really get people to change their strategy.
Rob, how was? Sorry, go, Eric.
No, I'll let go. I was going to change the topic, anyways.
So was I. So you go. I can say.
Well, I was just going to say, like, because I've been flying around all over the world, kind of going to different Bitcoin conferences and speaking and just meeting people, and like, it blows my fucking mind that Like this is happening everywhere all the time. Like I met a guy from Thailand. He was like, yeah, there was a big Bitcoin only thing. There was like 600 people. It was just like all Thai people. And then I was in Bali and same thing. There's all these Indonesians there that are like thrilled about Bitcoin, and same thing in Europe. Like it's just really wild to me that this is all happening like on its own, and it's sustaining itself on its own, and doing like somehow the Bitcoin bug is like getting into people's mind and like eating it out and replacing it with Bitcoin on its own. And it's just fucking incredible. Like I feel so inspired seeing like that sort of naturally unfold. And I guess I just wanted to kind of get your guys' vibe on your encounters with stuff like that too.
There was were you at the Thailand Bitcoin festival where they had like a bull, and they were like,
that was the Indonesian one. Yeah.
Indonesia,
bear in the bull. Yeah.
Were
like
you there?
Really,
were you there?
Yeah. Yep,
Dude, I was
awesome.
just watching the clips on Twitter, just thinking, gee, this is a fucking vibe. I love it because it's such a different culture than the culture I'm used to, but yet they're still so crazy about Bitcoin. It's just so cool to see, you know?
Yeah, and that's like the most exciting thing is like watching these like intercultural elements kind of come in and play with Bitcoin, and just seeing I don't know, like the way that Bitcoin really allows for like different cultures to like respect each other. And like in Dubai, we were talking about having because I'm going to the conference there, and we were talking about having like an interreligious dialogue with like a Christian, a Muslim, and a Jew, like all about how like Bitcoin helps them and with like their particular needs. So like I don't know. I'm really thrilled to see that like different religious groups are hopping on board, you know. And shout out to Jordan with Thank God for Bitcoin. I love the stuff that he's doing and putting out there, and I think it's great.
Yeah, well,
No,
you know, truth and freedom and fairness are universals, right? Or universally desired. And so when something emerges that allows you to access them to garner more of those things in your life, or at least more freedom in your life, more opportunity and all that kind of stuff, then it makes sense that it would cross cultural barriers, you know? And the other thing is we often talk about the religious connotations of Bitcoin. You know, one of the impediments to certain religions, you know, being universally adopted, let's say, is because they're so culturally influenced, right? They came up in, you know, certain geographic areas, and the language and the settings and all the things that happen in them are so influenced by the local place where they were developed. And so that's a stumbling block, because more so than anything, right? More so than racism or any other bullshit that often gets talked about, it's cultural differences that people are mad about these days, right? It gets called racism, but what people are really upset about is just cultural differences, acting differently based on what you were raised or conditioned by. And what's interesting about Bitcoin is like it's acultural in a sense, you know, not to say that there's not a culture forming around it, but that, you know, it's just ones and zeros, basically. It's just a digital protocol, right? And so for someone in Indonesia or Israel or, you know, Saudi Arabia, you know, it doesn't come with any baggage of like, oh, it's, you know, it's tainted by whomever's culture or a different set of beliefs or a different set of symbols or iconography or whatever. It's like, it's you know, it doesn't have any of that. So I think that's part of the reason why it can be seen for just actually what it is and represents, which among other things, perhaps, is truth, freedom, fairness, sovereignty, liberation for myself. And it's not held back by, you know, cultural differences.
Do you think people are really upset about culture, John? I think people are upset about class. And
well,
I think
definitely that too. But
culture is just a stand-in.
For example, I'll give you an easy example. When people say like Chinese are bad drivers, certain group of people be like, that's racist. Well, it's like, well, no, because the guy that I grew up with that has two Chinese parents and grew up with me, like that doesn't apply to him, right? Because it's a cultural reason why, you know, if you're making the case that people from mainland China are bad drivers, it's not genetic, it's cultural. That's all I mean. You know, so when oftentimes, like if we look at whatever the issue of the day is that people are outraged about, and people are claiming that it's, you know, racism or bigotry or sexism or whatever, I think most of the time it's a cultural difference. It's a different set of conditioning and a different set of, you know, values that bubbled up a different behavior. It's not like people are actually criticizing people's behavior because of the color of their skin, because it's just so absurd on its face, you know?
I did hear a cultural difference recently that made me like violently angry, and it's that Canadians, their milk comes in a bag rather than a carton. Is that true, John? Is that true? Your milk comes in a bag?
I've seen it. I don't know if it's common, but I have seen it.
I was like, what the hell?
fuck
What
is
kind
wrong
of
with
communist shit is this? You guys are getting
Yeah.
milk bags up there?
My milk comes straight from the cow, motherfucker, and it comes direct to my door. I don't mess around with that bagged or grocery store bullshit. You know what I'm saying? Can't be
Comes
can't be
from a
drinking
bag with titties
pasteurized
on it.
milk. Yeah,
Respect.
exactly.
Respect, dog.
You need that raw shit, brother. You know that.
I go back to Bitcoin as Venice again. We've been talking a lot about this mysterious link between culture
I
and
gotta pee again.
capital. Every time I talk, he's got to pee. Um,
I hope you can hear us from the bathroom. Go, Robert.
it was kind of mind blowing for me to like actually think about culture as a form of capital. And so maybe all this, you know, we're seeing Bitcoin monetize and change other cultures, maybe, or develop its own culture. I don't really know, but it's like it's whoever said it earlier, it's acultural, right? It's cross cultural. It just goes everywhere. And maybe the other thing I was thinking there is like maybe cultural change is actually a leading indicator of more traditional changes in the capital stock. Because when you think about historically, it's like the cultures that adopted a classically liberal ideology / culture, well, those are the ones that created obviously more individual freedom and then ultimately more and better physical capital, right? More innovation, all these things. So maybe Bitcoin's like Trojan horsing classical liberal ideology into every culture, something like that. And that's why it's such an explosive cultural force. You know, people get so excited about it.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point. I mean, certainly Bitcoin respects, you know, it has a lot of classic core American values, right? Like it's respect for property rights. It basically gives property rights to people in jurisdictions who aren't otherwise granted property rights by their sovereign, which is a pretty goddamn big idea. And when it comes to cultures and Bitcoin, I tend to think that Bitcoin, there's a lot of talk about like Bitcoin Twitter culture, which is just a weird subculture and it doesn't represent Bitcoin culture at all. Like it's the nexus of like a certain type of, you know, power in Bitcoin, like some type of cultural power in the West resides on Bitcoin Twitter or whatever. But like, I basically think that Bitcoin is like a prism for world cultures and that like every world culture is going to be put through the prism of Bitcoin. And some of them are going to be sticky to Bitcoin and some of them are not going to be. Some will be changed by Bitcoin and some will change Bitcoin culture at large. And like, there's going to be 1,000 Bitcoin cultures, you know? And so, yeah, I think it's however people want to use Bitcoin, as long as it's in consensus, to me is okay. Like the ordinal thing doesn't bother me. I don't know if it bothers you guys, but it doesn't bother me because it's in consensus behavior. So as long as you're not attacking the network, like have at it. You can use Bitcoin in an Islamic fashion. You can use it in a Jewish fashion. You can use it in a Hindu fashion. It doesn't matter to me at all.
I mean, the only thing that pisses me off about ordinals is that there's potential to do like real art and people keep making the same kitsch bullshit over and over. And it's just like, God damn it, you guys, like inscribe something fucking useful. Like the war logs that were inscribed by Project Spartacus. Great fucking use. I want to see more war crimes documented on Bitcoin. Your monkey images, I'm really fucking over them, and I don't understand why people are enjoying them. But hey, you know what? You guys are paying minor fees, so I guess I can't object that much.
You could sell war crimes as an art collection. Like this is an actual war crime that you can own.
I really want to like
Yeah.
use recursive inscriptions to like sell somebody something and then like have that thing get destroyed at a certain block and be like, what are you talking about? It was like right in the code. You should have known that, guys. Come on.
That's like a Banksy style thing.
Yeah, exactly. There's like fun shit to do. But anyway, I think Bitcoiners have like this is just what happens in a bear market. Everybody starts arguing with each other about superfluous bullshit. It becomes something bigger than it probably should. And now the price is going to rip super hard and people are going to be like, hey, what were we upset about again? Like,
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
Speaking of culture and such, Rob, you were recently at the ARC event put on by Peterson and Co. What was that like?
Oh yeah, how was that?
Yeah, it was pretty cool. So I guess I should first say I spent the first few days just interviewing people for the show. So I wasn't really engaging with the programming. But I did go to the dinners and the events and whatnot. And I think it's a good effort. I would say the crowd was a little bit stodgy, perhaps,
Douchey.
kind of an older crowd. A lot of states people were there. There were also a lot of thinkers and writers and entrepreneurs. Um, but the one panel that I gave on the third day was on the future of money. We had 20 minutes, one moderator,
Jesus.
three panelists to talk about the future of money. So it's like, okay, we need 1,000x this time slot, basically. But the point that I tried to deliver as best I could is, one of the pillars of ARC is free markets. Right? They're trying to be this anti-World Economic Forum thing. So like, well, we don't need more regulation. We need more free markets. Like free markets are the best problem-solving force in the world type of thing. So my position was, hey guys, I think the elephant in the room here is you've talked a lot about the importance of free markets, but no one has addressed the central planning of money, right? Like if you have a central bank, then and money's one half of every transaction, then you could free every single market in the world. But if you still have a central bank, then you're at best a 50% free market because money's one half of every transaction. So my point was like, hey, the elephant in the room here is nobody's talking about the central planning of money. And it's the problem socioeconomically, as far as I can tell. And I don't know, the audience was, I don't know, they looked a bit shocked perhaps by it. It might have been a little bit too far out of the Overton window for them. But they did appreciate it when I said Bitcoin is basically what happens when gold and the internet have a baby. So that seems to be their level of interest in Bitcoin.
Maybe it is an age thing that they just feel like they have to petition the states in some sort of a Reagan, Thatcher era manner in order to get deregulation or whatever, and that's just their framework, and they just want that era back or something. Is that like, I don't know,
it felt like a very conservative sort of statist framework for most discussions. Obviously there was it was peppered with a lot of the theological, philosophical stuff you would expect from Peterson and Jonathan Pajot, and Bishop Barron was there, so it was seasoned with that. But a lot of the economic and social policy discussion was within a statist framework, and I think that the Bitcoin discussion was probably the only thing outside of that.
I wonder why. I mean, I can get like not fully seeing why and how Bitcoin is a solution to that problem that you just mentioned, but why would something like central banking be so outside the Overton window? It's like it's not a hard thing to grasp.
It's a dogma that people just don't think about,
Yeah, I think we have a hangover, right? From
It's like
100 years of not educating people about it, or ignoring Austrian economics, or mainstream university curriculum, just indoctrinating people in Keynesian economics. I think there's just this giant intellectual hangover that people, we're the fish in water thing, right? That everyone's like, oh, there's all these fucking problems. Everyone's hacking at the symptoms, but no one's equipped to identify the root. It's sort of hidden in plain sight. And, obviously it's hard to talk about, right? We spend a lot of time talking about it. You have to be multi or interdisciplinary, I guess, to really get a handle on it. And even when you get a handle on it, you don't really, right? It's such a slippery topic, the nature of money. You're like talking about a perceptual apparatus. You're like talking about language itself in a way.
Yeah, I mean, that part is much more tangly, but just the notion that, having at the center of every economy an institution that is able to siphon purchasing power and productivity at will to a very small class from the larger class. I mean, even the mechanism is pretty clear, right? You press a button, more units, no more goods and services.
People like Peterson say this. He's like, well, as long as productivity goes up, then you want inflation to go up. So there's like this fundamental breakdown.
Yeah, Peterson's pretty rough on
their psychological or their intellectual worldview when it comes to inflation, the nature of money, basically. So I don't know. It's a tricky one, right? Because it's easy to say, okay, printing money is theft, inflation is legal counterfeiting. But, the counter argument real quick is like, oh, well, what would we do during COVID? We needed to print money and send people checks. So what were we going to do? And then Peterson's other thing, he's like, well, clean up your room before you criticize the world. So he kind of takes this default view that if central banking is the paradigm that is, well, there must be a deep reason why. Like we need it to have stability, price stability, or whatever the thing is. And you just basically a lot of people that haven't done the proof of work to go down the rabbit hole and see this thing for what it is, as far as I can tell.
I think conservative intellectuals tend to have an over-reliance on the Lindy effect, which is understandable, right? Because if something is Lindy, it stood the test of time, and so therefore it's not something that should be mucked with, like in the words of Peterson, right? But like, in areas that are of extreme import, it behooves one to do the work of first principles thinking and dig in, and money is an area of extreme import, right? So you can't just say like, listen, if there's a gate in the woods, that's Lindy. We're not going to remove that gate for some dumb reason. Like maybe there's a good reason that gate is there. I don't know, right? But like money is something that, we have a long history with it. Yeah, gold is Lindy, right? Like, and gold will still exist on the Bitcoin standard. Fiat currency is an aberration, and it's not going to be here into the future, my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, like it's interesting to me that he points to productivity, because it's like, well, what are those metrics of productivity, and like how are we measuring them versus what an alternative system would be? And then the Keynesian thing that always pisses me off is they're like, yeah, like if the government controls money and like spends it on good stuff, that like helps increase productivity. And you're like, well, whose productivity and what and high and like what? Why are we considering that productivity? Is like making a bunch of war machines? Is that actually like a productive enterprise, or like? Is like helping small farmers actually like be able to like grow food better? Is that like more productive? And like how can we align with these things? And I don't know, I can't help but think that it's part of a massive propaganda campaign that's really focused on the fear-based aspect, because like if you can get people to be afraid of the alternatives, like they're not going to consider them.
I think when you consider that Bitcoin's 15 years old, and pre-Bitcoin no one used the term fiat currency.
Yeah, that's a win, right? For sure.
And now it's been popularized. Like that's probably a testament to how long it takes these ideas to permeate mainstream thinking. And when you address that to a crowd that is by definition succeeded under the old paradigm, and they're old, it's like that the idea of, I guess, non-centrally planned money is pretty radical, basically.
Yeah. This goes back to, the patience comment earlier. Like we'd all like everyone to get it sooner, but these things play out on timelines that are beyond our control. But I wonder, to what extent do you think there's a bit of the Upton Sinclair thing going on, where it's difficult to get a man to understand a thing if his paycheck is dependent on him not understanding it or something like that? Because with a lot of people there were like conservative influencer, content creator, that kind of stuff. And, it's not this simplistic. There's obviously still a role for all sorts of content and information, but, the big question, right? Like, how do we fix this? Is a big question a lot of people are asking today, and pointing out the absurdity, and then, say, how do we fix all this? If the answer is just stay humble, stack sats effectively, then you're out of 50% of your content creation, or 90%, or whatever it is, and do you think there's any sort of, it could be willful ignorance, obviously, but for that demo of people that were at the conference, do you think some of it's like, well, if I just realize and point to Bitcoin as being like, yeah, just buy Bitcoin, secure it properly, live a moral life, and have patience and wait, that's not really compelling content. And so maybe it's not in their best interest. The incentive is off for them to get it.
I mean, these are people that are seeking state control, right? So like these are authoritarians who are seeking state control, state capture. That's why they're forming this conference, to create a counter narrative to the dominant liberal narrative, right? So that they can win, have control of the state, and then use the money printer to their advantage. I mean, it's like, of course, I don't want to be that uncharitable, but I will be. That's their incentive.
I would say it's a mixed bag for sure. There's probably a lot of that there. I think I would put the ignorance of economics and money at the top of the list of reasoning, right? Like people just don't understand how pervasive and important it is. It's kind of like the Jeff Booth thing, where they're trying to fix the system from within the system. It's like, oh, these regulations are bad. What we need are good regulations, or these people are bad. We need good people in charge. This just limited thinking, I guess. But yeah, I don't know. I would suspect that Bitcoin price, should ARK continue to be a going concern, will push Bitcoin more and more into the conversation over time, right? When this thing's worth whatever number, they're going to be like, holy shit, we actually need to talk about this more. Like, what is this thing?
Yeah.
And that's when these, this point that might seem radical at ARK 1, that, oh, central planning of money, bad idea, might become more normalized in the next 5-10 years.
We need to give Bobby Breedlove at least 90 minutes next year.
Yeah, well, we'll see about that.
His own panel. Nobody on there with you, just you ranting in front of people.
But, I mean, to dip a little bit into the realm of politics, I know we all have our reservations, but in Argentina, a guy just got elected whose primary promise was to shut down the central bank, and he reiterated it just after getting elected. And then in the States, Vivek and RFK Jr. have been critical of the Fed. I think Vivek's taken a more so-called extreme stance and saying, like, he realizes it's a parasitical institution and he wants a 90% headcount reduction. And when I listen to him speak about stabilizing the dollar and backing it with commodities and stuff like that, I see some ignorance from, as far as I'm concerned, about money a little bit, but directionally, realizing that institution is responsible for a lot of chaos and wanting to effectively shut it down or start the process of shutting it down by doing a big 90% reduction in the headcount. I mean, maybe he doesn't have a chance of becoming the nominee, but again, like with the Fiat comment, that, and he and RFK Jr. have been, outspoken about their support for Bitcoin. Even that, the last cycle would have been unheard of, right? Like, you would have been laughed off the stage to bring up such things. And now, there's definitely support for those sort of policies. Both Milei and Vivek are kind of like, we need to slash everything, right? We need to, cut the size of the state down by 75%, day one. Who knows to the extent either of them will do it if they have the opportunity. But the point is just that these ideas are seemingly much more palatable than they were 4-8 years ago. What do you guys think about those two dudes?
Milei said he's going to detonate the central bank, exterminate inflation, and take a chainsaw to the state. And I was just very excited to see language that we were using 6 or 7 years ago in Bitcoin now being used by the president of Argentina. Like that, how could that not be an exciting development?
Mm-hmm.
I was subsequently a little bit disenchanted to see he had meetings with
Bill
Dodd
Clinton
and Clinton and all these other people, but who knows? Like, who knows what game he's playing? And as I tweeted, like, all we can do is hope that he stays true to his vows. I still obviously don't trust politics or politicians, but at least that conversation's being had at that level.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think the Milei thing is interesting because it seems like you can vote yourself out of communism. I mean, I guess that's what just happened. We'll see if that plays out, TBD. But in terms of Vivek, I think Vivek is just saying wild shit because he knows he can't be the nominee. Trump is going to be the nominee.
What do you think his MO is, though, for saying wild shit? Just to
dude, if I knew I wasn't going to be the nominee, I would be like, yeah, we should fire all the federal employees. Fuck them,
Right. So
it
he's
doesn't
saying
matter
things
at that point.
that you think he wants to be out there. He just knows
I think he's saying things that he believes, which is what you do when you can't win.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, look, I really appreciate all of the dialogue that's coming out, but my Bernie burn can't help but feel up in its soreness here of that. Like, I don't believe in any politician or anything they say. I don't think any of them can change anything about the state. Like, I think it's all well-wishing, and I think every single individual that goes to try to essentially take on that role will eventually get integrated into it and ate by it. And like, I feel very strongly that like the only way to take care of the American government at this point in time is to disassemble it from the outside by the people. Hopefully a confederacy of states working together to disassemble the federal government. I think it's really the only viable aspect to actually like roll back the federal government in a meaningful way. And you're not going to get that from federal politics. And as for Millier, like he's said incredible things. I'm going to hold my breath until he delivers on at least half of them. And I think we're going to find something very similar to what we thought happened when Trump got elected, that he was, you know, going to really shake stuff up. And it turns out it's just business as usual. So to me, I always use this as a point to interject with people who go, look, like your enthusiasm about some particular politician, like that's a mirage. Like it's never going to happen. And I know you're very thirsty for that oasis that's waiting you, but I want to let you know it's sand. So like when you get there and you're drinking sand, remember, this is the promise that politicians give you.
Yeah, it was kind of the point we brought up with Tulsi, right? That, I mean, it's fine to want to choose the lesser of two evils, right? It's kind of sensible, I guess. But I think people put so much faith and hope in politicians. And, you know, if they say the right things, they really think they're going to be the one to change things. And the worst thing that does is it causes them to like fall down on the things that are in their control that they can do to affect the change that they actually want. And so obviously in our case, we talk about something like Bitcoin, right? It's like you continuing to place, you know, a politician on a pedestal thinking they're going to resolve everything is actually inhibiting you from taking the steps that you can take to, you know, be more sovereign yourself and stop feeding the beast and all those other things. And that's the kind of intoxicating, detrimental allure, I would say, about politics is like, you know, especially on a local level, it can be very sensible to try to get a more honest broker or the lesser of two evils again in, but not at the expense of doing everything that you can as an individual to affect the change that you want to see.
I do think it's sensible though to, if you have a pro Bitcoin candidate and an anti Bitcoin candidate,
right,
get your fucking ass to the voting booth and vote for the pro Bitcoin guy. I mean, come on, it's like you don't got to. This isn't elementary school. You don't got to pin all your hopes and dreams on this guy. This isn't Michael Jordan or something. Like it's just a dude. If he says the right things, great, give him the vote. You know,
as Americans, what do you guys think next year is going to be like? Because between the economic situation, the political, number of other things, AI even, it seems like it's going to be a kind of a wild year. At least there's a lot of potential for that.
I'll tell you this:
you think you're going to be voting for either Trump or Biden? Is that going to be it, or is Biden going to be gone by then? Is Trump going to be in jail? Like, what do you guys think?
I'm definitely not voting for Biden. I'll tell you that much. And if Trump wins, it's wildly bullish for Bitcoin because Trump is in favor of negative rates. If you remember from his first term, he was publicly berating Jerome Powell for, you know, not cutting aggressively enough. So if he does all those things from a macro perspective, the Bitcoin price is going to skyrocket. So yeah, I mean, vote for the Republican if you want, you know, high Bitcoin number.
So as an American, I would say don't vote. It's useless and detrimental to creating change, and you should know and understand that. So if you're one of those yahoos going to the voting booth or wearing your stupid little sticker, I'm going to know you're the NPC for who you are. So thanks for pointing that out. And on that note, like, I don't think like the Biden administration has invested far too much in suspending Trump from being able to run. So like, I really think like, last minute they're pretty much going to be like, Trump can't be on the ballot because he's a criminal and we convicted him, and Joe Biden is our hero and everybody loves him, and then Joe Biden will immediately die of like a seizure, and then we'll get President Kamala, who will proceed to make the rainbow flag the official American flag of America. Like it's going to get really, really, really stupid. Like stupid enough that like people could actually do something different. I don't think they will, because we're pretty lazy and the propaganda is pretty good at this point in time. But again, I'll continue my hope of that someone will start a radical Article 5 movement to collectivize the states and start ramming through amendments using just state legislatures. Because I think that's America's only hope, is that like if we essentially utilize states to like fight the federal government. But again, nobody's doing that. I'm the only guy that talks about it, so probably not going to happen.
If there is an American like civil war, I think it's going to be as Eric described. It'll be more of a divorce of the states than it will be a hot civil war. Maybe there will be like, you know, street level violence, but we have that now. You know, fuck it.
Yeah.
As an American, I echo Eric's sentiments about voting. I think voting's pretty much a waste of time. Uh, that said, I guess voting for Trump might be useful. I don't know. Like it seems like he was the unplanned element of this entire thing. So maybe that would throw a wrench into the machinery, but I don't really know. So I guess my main concern would be that we have an election next year. Seems like we might have some kind of emergency wartime power legislation to suspend the election. And that would probably be the worst outcome, to just kind of keep pushing through the current administration without even any semblance of democratic process. Not that it really matters that much, but that would be my biggest concern, I guess.
One of the things, I don't watch TV at all basically, but I see clips on Twitter and such, and not that this is really relevant at all, but just as an amusing little media narrative, I saw on MSNBC recently, they were showing the polling numbers, and for the first time they were really enthusiastically pointing out, and they used the graphs and the numbers to show this, that no, or any Republican could candidate could beat Biden, or I think it was that, and that any Democrat, any other Democrat candidate, like, and because they were polling people like either the existing candidate or some other Democrat, and then so the poll was showing, quote unquote, that any Democrat could beat Trump, but Biden couldn't beat any Republican, something like that, where it was just as horrible a poll as you could imagine for Biden, coming from MSNBC. And it's those sort of things that you don't see unless there's a narrative brewing, right? Like, I mean, these are straight up propaganda machines and networks, and they will say whatever they have to promote either their agenda or the agenda of their people pulling the strings or whatever. And maybe that's been going on for a while, but it was the more, because usually these places are defending Biden. Doesn't matter what happens, it's like, he's great, everything's fine, blah blah blah. And it was the first time where they're like, he has absolutely no chance regardless of the circumstances, which to me is like, oh, they're full on going to replace him before the election. Like, I know time is getting thin, but for me that was like definitely going to happen.
It seems like Gavin Newsom is getting into position, right? And like, I don't know why he's getting into position, but he's in position.
I think he's debating DeSantis tonight, actually. They're having like a side debate or something.
I saw him bulldoze a small Chinese child. Seemed malicious and intentful. I'm just saying. I saw that clip.
Yeah, me too.
He just ran right. He just, my what?
Wait, who did this?
Gavin Newsom.
Newsom playing basketball with some little kid.
Just checked him in the mouth.
He charged him. Yeah, he charged him.
That's about what I expect.
That was great. But when I was in Miami at the RFK thing at Saylor's, people were talking about the fact that a lot of, or some staffers from Biden had already gone over to Michelle Obama. And like, I don't know how they're going to pull that off, because she's, as far as I can tell, she's not on the radar anywhere politically. But you never fucking know. It's a little bait and switch, and I'm sure they put the full force of the media machine behind it, and you never know.
Why can't we just get a radical movement for some guy that's dressed up as a clown, and we'll like elect him? Like, I want Mr. Clown World to like get elected,
bro.
Like, he'll solve all the problems.
Fetterman in, where's he at?
Pennsylvania, but like, he's an actual clown. He's not like pretending to be a clown.
Well, I didn't know you wanted a distinction, but if you're ever going to get someone elected to public office that is incapable of speaking, I hate, I'm not trying to be mean to him, but like, it's outrageous that man was apparently voted into office. I mean, he just, he can't speak, unfortunately.
I just love that now, because we have to accommodate for him, that like anybody can like come into Congress and like sweater and a hoodies with like with like their cum stained sweatpants. I'm just going to be like, hello, I'm addressing Congress now. Let me read my notes.
It literally is them just sending. Could they send any more clear of a signal that we just don't give a fuck anymore?
exactly.
We don't give a fuck. Yeah, it's
Well,
amazing.
like I want this great
I
American
think they get
awakening for
off on
people
it
to like.
sometimes.
Oh, absolutely, get off
Yeah.
on it. I just want people to. I don't know, like I just want something different to happen. And like there's just so much capacity, like just not these same fucking suits who have the same crap to say, who aren't going to change anything. I want somebody who's kind of wild and crazy. Somebody who like move the entire, move the whole entire federal, DC, move it to the West Coast or some shit like that. Like I want somebody crazy who's really going to like mix shit up.
Yeah, well, I mean, if Trump does get in, maybe because he doesn't have re-election to consider, he'll do a lot of chainsawing, who knows. I mean, I watch it all as a spectator sport, as we've all been discussing. I think none of us hold any hopes for solutions in the political realm, right? So it is just a circus, and from that perspective, like it's kind of entertaining just because how outrageous it is. It makes me sad too because of the fact that it's real, but we have Bitcoin to affect the kind of change and solutions that we seem to want. And as we've been saying, like that's where I think we're all placing our energies such that, we can be somewhat unattached from just, the clown show that keeps rolling on. You think it's not going to be able to reach another level. And it's like, nope, one more, bitch.
I feel like
professional wrestling, but with real consequences.
Yes. I feel like with the new technology that we have coming in, with Bitcoin rising, with possible hyperinflationary collapse on the horizon, with the old elite class becoming so corrupt, I just feel like we're in this place that's very similar to like pre-World War I in Europe. Like pre-World War I in Europe, you still had the aristocracy, like there was all the assemblages of the old world, but all this new technology existed. And there was like this weird about 5-year period right before the war started where the mechanization and industrialization of Europe really hadn't happened yet. People were entering the war on horse-drawn carriages, etc. And I don't know, I just feel like we're still in that zone where it's like half of us are getting access to godlike technologies, and the other half of us are like staring through a peephole at the 20th century, being like, let's run it back. And you can't run it back. You can't go backwards. We have to just keep going forward, and hopefully the technologies liberate and shake up the social order in elite circles the way they did in Europe post World War I and World War II. But there was a lot of dead Europeans in order for that to happen. Quite a few.
Yeah, well, I think I don't know who made the point about conservatives. I think it was you, Hodl, but I agree. Like they're right to revert back to what was Lindy, right? In times of great change and chaos, it's like, yeah, go back to what worked in the past. That's a safe bet, but it leaves off the table any sort of aspirational thing. It's like, and people need aspirational to like, there's obviously a crisis in hope and hopelessness in the world today, it seems, right? There's, for all the reasons that we often discuss, like people look out in the future and it's just bleak. And of course that's going to affect your day-to-day life. It's going to affect how frustrated you are, how violent you are, all the crazy shit that we see. And Vivek, to his credit, has been saying this, like conservatives are mostly like, let's go back, the family unit, God, guns, like we got this. And that's just not retrofit for the 21st century. Like it's, yes, there is a reversion to like, let's stop some of the craziness and reevaluate how important some of that stuff is. But you need to have an aspirational, hopeful view for the future. And I mean, what more? I mean, this, again, we talk about this in Bitcoin all the time. Like, what's more hopeful than when you really start to grok Bitcoin and how it can influence your life, the world, the system more broadly? Like, it generates, the hopefulness kind of wells up inside of you. But I do agree that, that's one of the things that the conservatives miss. It's like, nobody's selling a hopeful vision. And that's what you need to be brought out of the mire of your own frustration and isolation and suffering and anxiety and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And again,
this is why I think, my personal bias is that libertarian right is the correct framework, because you should just be focused primarily on fiscal responsibility and maximum freedom for all people. And if that means that, you know, crazy chicks want to dye their hair pink, you just have to make your peace with that. Can't be a cultural conservative who's like trying to tell everybody how to live their life and create a nanny state, but just with a conservative flavoring. Nobody wants that, you know. It just let freedom propagate and let the chips fall where they may. That's my perspective.
I'm curious.
Totally agree.
Do you guys think if there was like an orange party, like some sort of radical Bitcoin first political movement, do you think it would gain traction, or would it just become the same shit show everything else is?
It'd be the same shit show everything else is.
Yeah, I thought so.
I think that would
it's like
be
the pirate party in
outcome.
Iceland.
Yeah.
Or was it Sweden or Iceland? I can't remember. One of them had the pirate party.
But Iceland, they elected, they got,
right.
I think they got plurality in parliament or some shit like that. But yeah, that didn't work at all. Turns out that the state just sucks, and we just.
But see, I mean, yeah, you never know, right? Because it's, again, the lesser of two evils is a good thing, right? Less impediments. But I think the main issue, and we all know this, but you can have the best people in the world ascend to like the helm of that system, and it's just corrupting, right? That's the problem. Like, it's predicated on, you know, all to operate it, to be involved in it, to affect change within it. Even if you can resist the enticements of all the, you know, the benefits that you can accrue to yourself that it offers you, even if you resist all that, just to play the game on the scale that it's at, and to try to affect change by people that you're so disconnected from so far away, from such different strata, all that kind of stuff. It's doomed to fail. It's doomed to be ineffectual. And I think it's ultimately doomed to, like, even if it doesn't, again, corrupt explicitly the people that, you know, a moral person that winds up at the top of it, it corrupts them in a different way, you know, almost convinces them that a method of effectuating change is possible and good, when it's actually not possible to do it in a good way, or without it being felt as coercive or evil by the people that you're ostensibly trying to help. Something like that. It's this, you know, I think it's the apparatus.
What do you think?
You're
about
not going to vote for me for dictator for America, John. That hurts.
I mean, I'm open to a pitch. I'm open to a good
He'd
pitch.
have to wear the sticker if he did so, and that's gay. So.
That would, my entire policy would just be, I hate the government. I'm going to tear everything down. I'll never visit DC.
Well, I mean, you know what's crazy about one, who knows what Milei does, but it's amazing that the Argentinian people were like receptive to that messaging, because it wasn't just like your run-of-the-mill libertarian. It was like small government and free market. He was like, I'm going to chop up the state and shove the pieces up your mother's asshole. Okay, that's like, and he would speak like that, and it worked. You know, so clearly people are receptive to not just the ideological messaging, but the intensity in the messaging.
And he was carrying around an actual chainsaw when he said it.
Right.
Yeah.
I like chainsaws.
What do you guys think about Balaji's concept of the network state? Do you buy into that at all? Do you think it's interesting? Do you think it's, you know, shows promise?
Yeah, all I know is that he's saying technology will make like nation states antiquated.
It's kind of like the sovereign individual thesis, but on a digital rails.
Yeah, it's a bit, his conception of it is still a bit vague at the moment, but essentially it's like Treaty of Westphalia, but in the digital age. You know, that's essentially what he's saying.
Yeah, like I'm on board for that. Like I think we're gonna get something relatively similar to that. Like, it strikes me that like the internet's its own political force, and it needs its own like political representatives. And I would love to see essentially like somebody is elected as tribune of the internet, and they're like a sacrosanct, like they can't be arrested anywhere, or like all of the internet anons like rise up and like set fire to everything. But you know, like I don't, it's clear to me we need something like that. And I'm thinking a lot about like how do we get this sort of political structure? And like, yeah, like a party structure probably isn't like, do you organize it as like the classic like sort of communist party lines, where like you have your own party that sort of operates outside of the state, like waiting to try to like seize onto it at some point, you know? And I've just been tangling with that a lot, because it strikes me as that like what's going on is deeply political, but like we don't have any organizational structure at all. And like maybe that's kind of how it works. Like maybe it's just kind of this slapstick, people do whatever the fuck they want, and like it kind of works out in the end. It seems to be working pretty well so far.
I kind of think, well, as you know, because I always say this, when you say those sorts of things about organizing, but I think that's the way to go, because the organizing stuff I think is doomed to all manner of failure for many different reasons. But every individual just withdrawing their economic and other forms of energy from the beast that they want to defeat and carving out a little domain for themselves, first in their own mind, then in their own family, then in their own community, then their own, locale, city, state, whatever it ends up being. I think that's how the seedling of sovereignty grows, not by taking on the Leviathan on a pitched battle, like face to face. And again, maybe it doesn't happen on timelines we would prefer, but that's where the humility comes in.
So, I mean, a big value proposition of Bitcoin and the internet is non-locality, right? The fact that this shit's everywhere, right? You can be anywhere and access the libraries of information of all time, and also move your money anywhere. And so I think it is an extension of the sovereign individual thesis, just to have political organization that's less dependent on place. And as I understand the network state, not that I've read the entire book, but it's basically that, right? It's people organizing themselves or coalescing around principles and values rather than just proximity. Like, oh shit, we're all on this island together, let's just figure it out. It's like, well, you can go online and make agreements and find the right opt-in structure for you, and then obviously move yourself and your capital more easily to that place. So, I haven't read the entire book, but I think to the extent that it's an extension of the sovereign individual thesis, it seems like probably a natural evolution of the state before it maybe goes into its actual twilight years, like the sovereign individual explores. So that's how I see it.
Kind of related to that question, Hodl, but curious, who these days do you boys like listen to in terms of, I don't know, expanding your perspective, or not really entertainment wise, but like who's your quote unquote influencer or influencers that you consult, if any? And if it's not in the realm of like content, video content, but books or whatever, I'm curious to know.
I've been listening to a lot of Huberman podcasts just because he's been giving me great information on biology and working out, and I've just been trying to take better care of my health. So he's my kind of health guru guy that I listen to. And outside of that, like I'm just kind of working on all of my own philosophical stuff. So I listen to different podcasts where guys are kind of discussing crazy shit like that I really like. And you guys also answer my question, like, fuck doing an orange party. I'll keep focus on my insane philosophy and trying to impart that to people, and maybe that'll do its own thing.
Well, also, Eric, just to caveat my response to you, who the fuck knows? I mean, none of us know, right? And you've always kind of done what felt right to you. Maybe you are right. So don't give it up just because we shat on it.
The advantage of you shitting on it makes me realize that one, it's a lot of difficult work that's probably not going to work out, and the doing a lot of difficult work thing, I'm not so gung ho for. So I'll just keep on my own I'll stay in my lane. I'll keep reading insane philosophy, trying to assert that in its political realm, and maybe it'll go do its own thing. But yeah, trying to organize something, as appealing as it is, it's chasing after a mirage.
You don't strike me as the organizer type. I will say though.
Yeah, it's true. I do got some organizational issues. So
I would say that in terms of influencers, yeah, man, I basically I listen to everybody, and then I rely only on myself. So I'm constantly taking in information from as many people as I can possibly get, and then make my own decisions. I don't follow anybody in any way, shape, or form. So be your own influencer, be your own North Star, right?
Totally.
How much are you
telling
consuming?
Us you listen to The View.
How much are you consuming, Hodl? Like, I find, well, maybe this is being a podcaster thing, but I found it very difficult to consume a lot of audio or video content since I started making it.
Consuming as hell.
It's like making it, I just end up reading books basically instead. But I'm wondering if you're listening to everybody, like how much does that actually involve?
Yeah, I do listen to like basically, I don't know, 100 different podcasts or something. And I track, usually I niche down. So like I'm tracking different developments in AI, or I listen to Huberman, or I'll track different fitness stuff, or I'll, whatever, finance stuff. But I'm just getting I'm in and out. Like I'll put it on while I'm doing other shit. Like when I'm at the gym, I don't listen to music. I just listen to a pod or whatever. Get an audio book going. Like I went through Rise and Fall of the Third Reich recently, which was fucking amazing. I'm looking for a new book at the moment, but like, yeah, it's all audio for me. So it's all just headphone stuff. And then I talk to people like a motherfucker, man. I talk to so many people all the time, and I get a lot of information that way. Just, I don't know if you guys have ever noticed this, but when you have a conversation with people, people really just want to talk about themselves. And if you're interested in data mining, they'll just tell you everything they know about whatever the thing is. And so when I'm in an Uber, there's like a box you can check that says like, don't talk to me. I never check that box. I'm like, broski, we are having a whole conversation about your whole life, what you think about politics, where you came from. I want to know it all. And so I just, I pick up what's in the ether that way. Like I like the chatter of human beings, and like still checking in on Twitter, seeing what the chatter is about XYZ topic. Like I still think that's very valuable, but at the end of the day, I'm not following anybody. It's really just me hearing everything and going, but because, one thing is when you take in information this way, you're more easily able to separate. There's not that many different types of people. There's like 25 different types of people, and everybody falls into, XYZ category. And so you can really quickly just, separate the wheat from the chaff and say like, oh, that's this kind of guy. That's this kind of guy. Right. And it helps you like determine. I give you a perfect example. Listen, the macro LARPing is fun, but I don't fucking know anything about macro, and neither does anybody else. It's all a bunch of bullshit. That's the truth, right? So like a year ago, when everybody was talking macro this, macro that, we're going into a recession, I had a really simple heuristic for myself. I listened to these people, I listened to them intently, and then I said to myself, is this person a fucking loser? And if the answer was yes, I just didn't do what they said, And that was it. That was all I did. And I held on to all my Bitcoin doing that. All of it. I still have it. It's great.
Wait, clarifying question. How do you talk to the losers and not just immediately dial them out or say rude stuff? Because I find myself
you
very
just say
frequent...
rude. You just say rude stuff.
Oh, okay. I thought maybe you had a tactic to get over that.
No. It's therapeutic for you. You just be like, that's retarded. Shut the fuck up. The stupidest shit I ever heard.
A lot of people have strong opinions about shit they know nothing about, and I'll go like 2 questions deep with them, and then they're like all upset and angry about it. I'm like, look, motherfucker, you're the one asserting your strong opinion about this thing. You don't even fucking know what it is. So,
Totally.
Was hoping you had a way to get over that, but apparently
I don't. I just say rude shit all the time.
Macro is the best litmus test for that too, because when people get super convicted about their macro theses, it's like, are you kidding me? Like that's the most unpredictable fucking thing in the world, basically.
Yeah.
The global complex system that is humanity. Like you're going to tell me exactly what's going to happen in the next 12, 24 months.
It's harder than trying to predict the weather.
Yeah.
It literally, the macro bros are just TA chart boys who happen to find a thesaurus on the ground and learn a bunch of fancy words. That's all they are. I can't stand it. I hate it. Shut the fuck up, macro bros.
My favorite is then you're like, oh, what? You like probably have like a lot of money. You've like made a lot of money if you like know about.
And they're like, oh, I'm poor.
They're like, look, like you need to pay this Uber bill. I'm sorry, you can't just walk away from it. I'm like, but I thought you were rich. You were talking to me about macro the whole time.
Dude, how many times have you had that experience where a guy is telling you about all this financial shit? And then he can't pick up the check. I've had that experience a bunch of times.
Really?
Yeah. In Bitcoin, that shit happens all the time, man.
Yeah, I don't, every now and then I do a hang with, Foss and Booth and Preston, and we talk about some of that kind of stuff, but
they're doing well.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of
you make them pick up the tab.
They got to pick it. Jeff Booth's got to pick up that tab for sure.
But as you guys were answering, I was thinking to myself, and basically I like Tucker's entertaining, so I watch Tucker.
Yes.
And but for other like educational stuff, there's basically no one anymore. It's like you said, Rob, it's all books and stuff. And it reminded me of something you said earlier, right when we started Hodl, because I'm listening to the Quran now, primarily when I'm at the gym. And interesting, but you said as an example of like, just how the crazy libs on TikTok are saying all sorts of insane nonsense and doing insane nonsense, in their recent protests and stuff, which I totally agree with. But the one thing I might have, pushed back on is, did you read Obama's letter about, like to America?
Wait, Osama's letter.
Sorry.
Osama's letter.
Same.
Yeah,
Did you read it?
I read it and I found it extremely ineloquent and mainly I don't know, I thought it was a bunch of gibberish. Like that was my perspective on it.
Okay.
I didn't think it was a good letter or an insightful letter. It was written
Well,
in
I mean, maybe not. I mean,
by a deranged goat fucker.
I'm not
so
commenting on his writing skills, but
Yeah.
And there's some religious stuff in there which maybe you can discount, but the rational components that I took from it was, and people have been talking about blowback for years. This is a big part of Ron Paul's shtick, right? Like, yeah, you go over and you kill people over there, there's going to be some consequences. And basically in the letter, he was just like, again, he said some other stuff, but the bulk of it was like, you keep coming over here and fucking with our shit and killing our men, women, and children. We don't really like that. So what we're doing now is a response to that. Now, you can make the case that he's just trying to rationalize his own like evil or whatever, but I think that particular piece of content, like, it's not irrational. I didn't think. I was like, yeah, that makes sense. If the Saudis were bombing the shit out of America for the last 80 years and influencing politics and doing whatever else, I mean, you might have some animus towards them and want retribution or revenge in some capacity, So again, I what the libs and the purple hair people are doing these days is totally insane. But if their assertion is like that letter had some merit to it, I hesitate to agree with them on that one.
Well, listen, the problem with that is that he talks about asymmetrical warfare in there, but killing a civilian population is not asymmetric warfare. It's terrorism, and you're a piece of shit. You know what I mean?
Everyone has done that.
There's no moral equivocation here.
But the U.S. has done that.
I know, but intent matters more than raw body count, in my opinion. Like, this is like you're gonna get into like the Noam Chomsky territory where it's just like the only thing that matters is body count. No, intentionality and killing matters as well. I'm not saying body count is not important, and obviously, like, the U.S.
But don't you think his intent is just hurting the enemy? I think that's the framework. By whatever means they're capable of doing so, and that was an available means. Just as the U.S. and any other power in history has hurt their enemy by doing the exact same thing, killing civilians. There's 1 million dead in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Yeah. I'm not saying we haven't killed civilians. Of course we have.
I mean, to me, like, this is one of the interesting things about contemporary war is that, like, in a lot of ways, like, it's not war anymore. It's just like about mass killing and like who can get those numbers up the most. And that was one of the really interesting things that like transformed inside of World War II. And this specifically came after the bombing of London, and that like the Germans started straying from their targets, not intentionally.
And then Dresden, you have Dresden as a reaction to London, which is an American war crime, to John's point.
Yeah, well, and then like we saw this tactic, we're like, hey, this like works really well. Like, let's firebomb Tokyo. And it's like, hey, like, lots of people dead, but that's part of the cost. And to me, like, this is also the fucking insanity. And like, back to the initial point, like, this is where it requires some nuance. Like, I think that letter had lots of merit to it. And Osama bin Laden is a terroristic piece of shit that I'm happy he was shot in a cave. Like, this requires a little bit of nuance. In the same way, it's like, I understand how and what Hamas is doing in Palestine right now is specifically built around what's going on in response to all the atrocities going on there. Again, with nuance. But they're also pieces of shit that are escalating the conflict by allowing for new topologies of these sort of atrocities to continue to carry out. And the final point is, like, lo and behold, it turns out this stupid motherfucking apparatus we call the state that has the justification to go murder people, it's still fucking murder if somebody else tells you to do it. So whether you're flying planes into a building killing civilians, or whether you're drone bombing brown children abroad, even brown children abroad who happen to be fucking American citizens, it's all fucking wrong. And if you're that invested in murdering somebody, how about you go take up your knife or gun and like you go wage that battle instead of telling other people that they should do that for you? Because, by the way, if you want to murder people under any context, you're generally a piece of shit and should spend some time self-reflecting on why you think murdering people is the solution. So,
amen.
Yeah,
amen, brother.
I agree. I just, I recoil at any justification of murder ever. It's really difficult. I mean, I even think when I was younger, I used to be pro capital punishment. And even though I still feel those feelings when a news story pops up about, some little girl getting tortured to death or something, of course, everybody feels those feelings. I really don't believe the state should have the right to murder somebody. So like I'm anti-capital punishment at this point, There's really very little
that's an interesting
justification for murder.
And also like splitting out this like personalized violence and state violence, I think are two things. Like, somebody murders your mom, you witness that, like you have every right to go stab them a whole bunch and kill them, in my opinion. Giving that right specifically to the state, I think, is a very particular form of injustice, not only because of the terms that it takes to achieve justice, but the general miscarriage that we see repeatedly happen through justice. And to me, I would love to see a new form of jurisprudence that utilizing the internet or something else to essentially establish a new methodology towards trying to establish justice that doesn't deal with this super shitty, antiquated system that's like failing us repeatedly and consistently. So, yeah,
I was having this conversation with my wife the other day, and I was telling her why I feel this way because she has a little bit more authoritarian tendencies, and she was basically saying like, how many innocent people are really in prison? I said there's 20 or 30,000 innocent people in prison right now, minimum. Some of whom are on death row. And she was like, really? And I was like, yeah, at least that many.
It'll be that like 1.5% of the U.S. prison population?
It'd be like 1% of the prison population.
Right.
So like, yeah, of course.
It's probably conservative, realistically.
I thought so. I thought so too. But it's like the state putting innocent people to death is just such a tragedy that I'd rather have guilty people go free, in my opinion. I didn't used to feel this way, but I feel this way now.
Man, that's a tough one.
This conversation, I think this topic at least is like points to the most complex area of being human, right? And it's so fucking messy. There's this conflation between the nation and the state, right? Like the idea of, the state blew up our people, so now let me go take retribution on the nation that is governed by that state, right? So people in the Middle East think, oh, well, American soldiers have been coming over here fucking shit up, basically committing terrorism on us for decades. Why don't we go over there and fucking kill some of them? And in one way, you can't blame them. It's like, oh, well, yeah, that's just normal eye for an eye kind of retribution. But in another way, it's like, well, you can't disentangle like the ultimate arrows of causality to the individual actors or decision makers that sent people to the Middle East to commit these atrocities. You can't go blow up civilians at random and expect to like actually catch those people that did the thing, right? And then there's the whole issue of consent, or like the soldier that was just following orders, or maybe they were brainwashed, right? Like, oh, I'm an 18-year-old kid, and I believe I'm spreading democracy by going over here and shooting people at order of the state. It's like, is that kid's fault? Or is it the guy that's hijacking his consciousness, right? Or that's brainwashing him to do that it's a good thing? Or is he a product of his culture? It's like, it's so difficult to disentangle it. And I think that, although we have to generalize to even have these conversations and talk about these complexities, we say like, oh, there's Americans and there's this nation and this group and Hamas or whatever the group is. We're always sort of blunting the reality, right? The reality is the world's composed of individuals, and we're just putting people in these arbitrary groups to sort of simplify and reduce the complexity and be able to communicate and talk about it. But that leads to weird conclusions when you're like, oh, well, the Americans did it, so fucking kill all the Americans. It's like, well, I'm American. I was born in the US. I didn't decide to be born in the US. I don't recall ever voting for the war on terror or whatever else. But then there's a further complication. It's like, well, I hold US dollars in bank accounts. Those are the same US dollars that are counterfeited to pay for the war on terror. So technically it's my purchasing power getting plundered to fund the war on terror. I think we spent $2.5 trillion over 20 years for the war on terror, and we printed like $2.8 trillion in that same time frame. So the whole thing was paid for with printed money. So technically, if you hold US dollars in an account anywhere, you're complicit in the war on terror, whether you know it or not. So it's like so fucking complicated and very difficult to disentangle. And there's like no good answer, right? There's no justice or solution or regulation that we can pass.
Right.
The real answer is like stop the printing of money, right? Stop the stealing, and you could stop the violence in theory.
By the way, these things, these really incendiary feelings that you feel when you talk about the 9/11 terrorist attack, or somebody defends the 9/11 terrorist attack, or like whatever, you say, why don't we view it from different lens or whatever, and you have these feelings come up in you, like from whatever side of the aisle, or when people talk about Israel Palestine and these intense emotional feelings come up. These are the feelings, these knee-jerk reactions that give the state authority, that give the state power. Right. And this is why, like, we live in this constant state of emergency, because every time you can create an emergency and rile up these animal spirits, you can get more power, more control, more authority, because, hey, somebody just did something to us. We got to go fucking kill those people so they can't do it again. Like that's very innate to humanity. And, we've outsourced it in a way that's very cowardly, I think. A lot of people were coming at Ben Shapiro recently because he's basically calling for a war that he has no intention of fighting himself, which is, and he's doing it in quite a bloodthirsty manner, and it's fairly cowardly, right? Mm-hmm. At the same time, I understand, as somebody who's like, from his perspective, he's a Jewish person, and that was a pretty horrible attack, and not to get into all the complexities of that whole quagmire, but like we're not responsible for what the state does, right? So like when Osama bin Laden kills 3,000 civilians who are just going, they woke up, they took a shit, they went to their job, they had hopes and dreams and lives and children and families. They were not responsible for what the U.S. war machine had done to his people or whatever, and so you become the evil that you were seeking to eliminate. And it's like, I don't know, man, it's just such a cycle of Bitcoin fixes this, bro.
Well,
I largely agree with you, but I would say that there is this element of responsibility, like when you pay taxes or when you hold dollars. And I say this as someone who fucking pays taxes and holds dollars. Like I feel morally culpable, right? Just having the awareness that we have in these discussions, but it's so goddamn complicated. It's like, what else are you going to do? So
here's where I disagree a little bit, because when you pay taxes, you are compelled by force of violence. You have a gun to your head every time you pay taxes. Now, using dollars, maybe you don't have to use dollars, but it'd be massively inconvenient. But taxes, they will literally put a gun to your head and pull the trigger if you don't pay your taxes. That's how that works.
Well, let me ask you this. A guy has a gun to your head and he says, kill that person or I'm going to kill you. What do you do?
No.
Yeah, that guy is the state, and that person is a Jew, and you just became a Nazi the minute you pull the trigger, right?
Actually, the answer is I would prefer not to.
Right. Yeah. But my obvious point is that, like, obviously it's just a more poignant example of the taxation thing, right? Yeah. It's like, well, I was compelled to pay taxes. Like, okay, sure. But if you were compelled to shoot somebody and a gun was to your head, what would be the play? And I mean, I think if we're saying that condemning innocence to death is like the height of immorality, basically, then I think you'd have to say, with as strong a conviction in your, beliefs and values and virtues and moralities as possible, say, I don't want to taint myself by acquiescing to your demands, so I would rather die than to participate.
And if you died with your keys, you would make the contribution to the anti-state force that is Bitcoin, right?
Right. And now I just got two things. I know this, or sorry, you answer the question, huh? To the question, I would like to think that I wouldn't pull the trigger. I would like to think that. Right.
But like as a father, it gets really complicated. And like,
right.
Yeah.
We could discuss this forever.
If I could pull the trigger and go home, I would probably do it, even though it's against my principles.
But that would contradict the capital punishment thing.
Yeah, no, I know.
But anyways,
I would violate my principles for survival.
Yeah. Gotcha. But see, that's the problem, right? Because basically everyone has a price, whether it's your life or something lesser, that you'll do the bad thing for. And here we are. But what I wanted to say is, like, we could get stuck in this, like, what is justice and how to effectuate it forever. But at least from the, and Rob, what you said, I mean, you can't like reduce such complexity, like there's always a line of causation. But I do think Bitcoin provides us an opportunity to clean our hands as much as possible, right? To maintain our innocence. I mean, that's the whole point. It's like the war machine and the state and whoever the bad guys are going to do what they do, but at a minimum, and who knows how justice is supposed to be dealt with in the world. It's a religious question. It's a statecraft, political question, whatever. But at least now we have the ability to opt out from the system that makes us culpable, right? And all of us are probably remaining in that system just out of convenience. I mean, we probably could be less culpable. We probably could participate in it less, but we're making a trade-off for convenience and trying not to deal with the uncomfortable questions of what that means. But what Bitcoin represents is like your hands can be clean. And that is at a minimum, I mean, again, who knows how justice is going to be dealt with, but at a minimum, knowing that you didn't have a hand in things is a pretty fucking awesome thing to have available to a person. And the downstream effect of you choosing that opt-out is that you're also removing your contribution to the lifeblood or the sustenance of that thing that's doing those immoral or unjust acts. And again, back to the original point, is like if enough people do that, well, that thing atrophies and you get less unjust acts. And maybe that's all we can hope for, because, the idea of justice is maybe will always be trying to figure out what the best way to apply it is.
So, John, is this the way that you're announcing that you're no longer paying taxes, so you won't be culpable anymore?
Of course not, Eric. I'm a law-abiding citizen wherever I reside.
I mean, in all honesty,
the harder you hodl, the less taxes you have to pay. Just so.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I'm actually curious about at what point do people start really, because like I think there's a very strong ethical, moral, and legal argument to be made that like us paying our federal taxes is not only illegal and unconstitutional because of the way it's being funneled towards crimes against humanity. And I'd be very curious if what a tax resistant movement would look like with Bitcoin, where people essentially take whatever they're going to pay in taxes, put it into address, go, there's my money. You ain't ever going to fucking have it until you guys stop waging your fucking unconstitutional and unjust wars, and that we actually get some meaningful democratic process around how the fuck our money is spent. Like it's just so bananas.
Cool story,
to me
bro. Black bag.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't. Well, you guys are going to hang out in the gulags with me, so maybe I should encourage this.
Well, I was gonna say the problem is that like you need the elites to do it. So you need rich people to do it, and rich people are not going to do it because they can put the screws to them much easier.
Yeah, and again, there's
true.
too much on the line for that approach. It's going to be a sovereign individual thing. You're just going to move to a jurisdiction where you're less culpable, you're taxed less, all that kind of stuff. Unless you have a crazy strong reason to hang around, like you'd probably rather move to Madeira or El Salvador, or the Cayman Islands, than be black bagged and put in a fucking basement, isolation cell, Eric.
Yeah, I just really like where I live, and I don't know. I have a strong feeling too. If we like lose America in this process, like this whole thing goes to being from like a 30-year thing to like a 300-year thing. But
no, we can't.
Maybe that's just the way it goes.
No,
well, we're already losing America pretty fucking hard. Like, look at the retards that were parading out in front of us to like be elected. Like, I can't believe a man that is constantly forgetting what the fuck he's talking about is the president of the United States. Like, it's really,
it's
really
disgusting.
impressive.
Because I'm not drinking my milk out of a bag like John does. Okay, no, I mean America is the Alamo of the world. America is where you make your last stand. America has the most freedom on the largest landmass with the best geography. I mean, the best culture. America is awash in firearms. You can't just give that shit up to go where.
The last one is the most important one currently. All the other ones I could probably argue, but the last one is super relevant.
Super important. Yeah, I mean, America.
Did we lose Hodl?
Be uncouth. Did you guys lose me?
Yeah.
No.
You're back now.
5 seconds.
I'm back. Okay. Look what's happening in Ireland. If you have a meme on your phone that they consider to be hateful, that is now a crime. Possession of memes is a crime, or they're trying to make it a crime in Ireland. I mean, what the fuck is that?
Well, it's the argument we were saying with Saylor, right? It's like the digital West is where to go now. I mean, and you got to live somewhere. So of course you make a meat space decision as well. And maybe America is and will be the best option. But I kind of tend, I kind of think the balkanization thesis is, probably going to play out, where these smaller jurisdictions that offer more freedom. So you'll go there with your capital and, that'll be.
Yeah, I mean, listen, if Texas secedes, like Texas is still America. Texas is still North America.
Right.
If America goes from the United States to the American Union, like that's still America in my mind, as long as you're in one of the good states.
We got to move that dial though. We gotta get states outraged enough that secession's on the board. So maybe I'll move to Nevada. You and me can work on the state legislature there.
It's getting more blue over here. All the Californians are here now.
I'm sorry.
It's the problem. It's like a disease, It's like we have ticks.
Where are you, Hodl? Are you public about
Nevada?
that?
Nevada.
Oh.
Yeah. So yeah, it's all the Californians have moved here because there's no income tax in Nevada. And
I'm probably gonna do that too.
Was it previously like pretty red?
It used to be very cowboy Wild West. Like during the Bush years, it was a red state, and it still is a purple state.
Mm-hmm.
I think they stuffed the ballots the last time around. I mean, it was like a midnight decision on Joe Biden. So like personally, I don't believe it. I don't meet a lot of people around here that fucking voted for Joe Biden. I've never met a person in my life that voted for Joe Biden, John. I'm just gonna say it out loud.
Right.
He was the most popular president of all time, allegedly.
Yeah, that's so fun. I mean, that shit is so ridiculous. And again, I have no special knowledge, but everyone, like, they've been giving Trump such a hard time since he was in office, obviously, but particularly, any claims about election interference, it's the most absurd thing ever. It's like, how would you feel if you worked at a company, like a big company, multiple divisions, and like for the entirety of the time you worked there, everyone was trying to fuck with you. They're being dishonest. They were like telling the boss lies about you. They were telling the board that you were stealing, everything they could possibly do to get you out. And then you're supposed to believe that when it comes time for your like pay raise or to continue your contract, they're all just going to like act nobly and honestly and admirably. And there's not going to be any funny business. Like that's absurd, to like that they would expect him to think that, whatever the truth of the actual matter might be.
Well, there's one of those there's one of those things again where like you use conspiracy theory just to like shove all of it off, where you're like, hey, there could be voter fraud. It's just like conspiracy theory, won't think about it anymore. Nope.
Yeah. But we could go on forever with that situation. Anyways, gents, I think we've shut it down. I think we're good here. Any closing remarks before we say goodbye?
I love you guys. I miss you guys. I'm trying to like do a podcast where I'm like doing a reading of my book and like a chapter with somebody who did it. So if any of you guys want on, Rob, you could do the forward, considering you did the forward. So
you mean you want to come on and read a chapter and discuss it?
Oh no, I got my own. I'm gonna do my own thing, and so this was inspired because Fractal and Crip reached out and he wanted to read through a chapter like that. It was a great 3-hour discussion. I was like, this is like how I need to actually like put my book out there. So if you guys,
I'll definitely do one. I'll definitely do one. It'll be fun.
I'm trying to like organize so like I do maybe 1 or 2 a month or something, and I'll kind of roll them out like that. But yeah, it's been a fun discussion. Also, getting to talk to people about my insane book and the crazy shit in it has been a lot of fun. So it's fun to see how that's shoving people deeper in the rabbit hole.
Yeah, I'm happy to help however you like. I guess just a closing thought on the whole thing about not losing America, which Hodl makes a great point. I mean, we've already lost big parts of it. Like it's just the red states now. And I don't think the whole southern border being wide open is a coincidence, right? I don't know what's going on there, but it seems like they're trying to cripple the red states, or at least, flood them with people from outside the U.S. So I don't know. It is important that we hold the Alamo. If it goes down, if we lose the red U.S., then that's a pretty big
then you're
torch going out.
Welcome
for the world. Yeah. So hold down the fort, I guess, would be the closing remark.
By the way, okay, not only are we going to keep America, but we're taking Canada. Okay, when I become president of the world, Do you know that 90% of the Canadian population live within 100 miles of the U.S. border? All we have to do is declare our border 100 miles north and be like, it's all ours now, bitches. What is Canada going to do about it? Fucking nothing. They're just going to sit there and take it. You know, they would be like all upset and be like, maybe I'll write a letter about it. Like, no, we don't care. We're just going to kill one guy. We'll just be like, bang. And they'll be like, who else wants some? And they'll be like, oh, whatever.
That would be
and
great.
I feel like that one guy's life is a worthy sacrifice I'm willing to make to bring freedom to Canada. Okay.
How dare you? How dare you? But that might actually be grounds to move back if you guys could pull that off. So
let's do it. Let's start the revolutionary movement to have America secede. We'll get it going in Canada too. You guys can secede and join whichever states, and we'll kind of hodgepodge it all up.
Fun fact. So I'm from Newfoundland. It's an island on the East Coast, and they joined Canada in 1949. It was like a quasi-independent country, still kind of part of the Commonwealth before that. But at the time, there was this big, it was a big deal, a referendum or election on like to join Canada or the US. And so the guy that wanted to join Canada was like a local politician, like socialist kind of dude, right? And he wanted to join Canada. And the guy that wanted to join the US was a local, like multi-millionaire, famous oddball media tycoon, owned TV, radio, publishing all throughout Eastern Canada. And super interesting guy. I mean, and my dad worked for him when I was a kid, and so I got to hang out with him. And you know, he would always tell me stories of UFOs and elongated skulls he bought on the black market in Peru, and like eating an all butter diet and all sorts of like how the pyramids were built. Just like fodder for like a young, curious kid's mind. He was super cool. And the two of them subsequent to this. So the punchline is the socialist one. But subsequent to that, they went down to Cuba to try to do an interview with Fidel Castro, and they ended up not getting the interview. Like he had agreed to it, but he ended up never showing up. And so the whole film is just the two of them hanging out at the mansion that Fidel put them up at, having conversations about socialism versus capitalism and all sorts of stuff. It's called Waiting for Fidel. It's actually, I don't know if it'll be interesting to like non-Newfie people, but I found it to be like an interesting window into the time and what was going on. But in any case, I want to let you know that we were almost, had the capitalists, won, I would be your countryman at this point. But sadly, the socialists won, and we kind of know the rest of the story, what happened in Canada. So maybe someday, if King Hodl takes the reins.
We can do it by force. Don't worry.
All right, so Hodl for president. We got our plan now.
Yeah, there's your Orange Party ticket.
Listen, I'm against violence, but I'll make an exception for you, Canada.
All right, boys. Well, look, it's November 30th, 1st of December tomorrow. Hope you all got your Christmas music and your eggnog lined up like I do. And if I'm not speaking to you guys before then, have a great Christmas, and we'll talk soon.
All right. Happy New Year, folks.
Gentlemen.
Merry Christmas, guys. Happy New Year.
See ya.